Welcome to the Supper Talk podcast, where we have all those conversations that you don't want to have with your family. I'm Steve, and this is my son, Chris.
Hello.
And today we're going to solve all the world's problems by tackling Ozzy Osbourne.
I mean, you shouldn't tackle someone after they've passed. That's that is inappropriate on so many levels.
yeah, there's,
Ah, I have an interesting story about it actually. So yesterday, it's Wednesday now, so it happened yesterday, the 22nd, and the barber shop is across the street from a cemetery. And when I came into work yesterday morning, the barber that was working was like, "Hey, did you see across the street what happened?" I was like, "No, what's across the street?" He says, "There's a pink headstone." Uh, and I look out the window and like literally what my front view is the grave of J.R. Simplot. And that's been a big joke for people who've lived in Boise. Hey, do you know where Simplot's buried? That's where my shop's at. For people who don't know, J.R. Simplot is the potato mogul. He is the guy who made Idaho famous for potatoes, and he did the flash frozen potatoes that were sold to McDonald's, and that is why Idaho is associated with potatoes.
yeah, and it's not
So
just Idaho. I mean,
no, no,
the whole reason why McDonald's has fries
it's
in
simple.
is Simplot. Yeah, he was
Yeah,
like, "Hey, I can sell you these super cheap, and you can add them to your burger, and you're gonna make so much more money."
yeah.
So they bought them, and then burgers and fries became like, peas and mashed potatoes.
Yeah, and Simplot is a huge employer in the valley. Simplot is synonymous with Idaho. It is a worldwide brand. I used to cut a guy who worked for Simplot that his job was doing R&D for the restaurants that they were in contract with. So he would go to Paris all the time to do the test facilities at McDonald's in Paris for the Parisian menus, and like their worldwide touch is massive. So you've got Simplot, you have Bora, you have Andrus, you have all of these state lawmakers and governors and movers and shakers. And in this very specific section, there's a very vibrant pink headstone. And I was like, well, that's clearly interesting. I'm gonna go see what that is. So on my lunch break, I go over to the headstone and immediately find out that it's this very, very, very touching story. It was a girl who had passed away when she was 3, and a couple days ago is what would have been her 10th birthday. So it's pretty easy to kind of figure out the story of, okay, I think the family went and decorated and celebrated her 10th birthday, and they went all out. They did a very thorough job of making it this really beautiful like little 10-year-old girl pink color. They replanted all of the flowers around it. They did a great job. So I'm going back to the shop like, oh, I'm kind of expecting like, oh, what is this? And then I'm getting a reality of like, oh, that's really touching. That's really moving. And then I get in the shop, explain that whole story to the other barber and the guy that he's cutting. And then as soon as I walk in the back, I get the notification on my phone about Ozzy. And I'm like, motherfucker. And I just go into the main room. And Jim's like, what's wrong? What's wrong? I was like, hang on a second. And I put on the stereo. I was like, Mama, I'm coming home. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
it was a. I remember when I saw it, and whenever something like that happens, I've got to check about 4 or 5 different sources to make sure it's not
Fake
you
or
know
somebody just
yeah,
pulling a prank.
I don't understand why people do that. They like
Yeah.
announce somebody's death as a prank to see how many people they can get to talk about it on the internet.
I blame whoever it was in Hawaii that did the national emergency text message. That just gave way too many ideas to way too many people.
Yeah, and there's and particularly in Hawaii because even if you don't if you're not of an age to where you can remember Pearl Harbor, uh, everybody knows about Pearl Harbor in Hawaii, and everybody knows about the Punch Bowl, which
Nope.
is this massive U.S. cemetery where there are all these soldiers and sailors and Marines that are interred in a beautiful, beautiful, like little crater of a volcano.
So what are you drinking today? I've got some Hoplark, which is just a nice Citra hops sparkling water. Not doing
I've
any
I've got a
beers
great
today.
early afternoon beer. It's called First Ride, and First Ride is a dark beer. It's like a stout, but it's got coffee in it. So like I like a little bit of coffee in the afternoon, just a little bit, not like a whole pot or anything like that. But a shot of espresso or a double shot of espresso, something like that, is really really nice in the afternoon because it'll carry you through for a while.
That's Boise Brewing. I wish they would do an A's, but they had a snowboarder porter that had a little bit of coffee in it, and that was one of my favorite beers. It's just like so smooth.
Yeah, yeah. There's and coffee goes so well with a nice malty dark beer.
Mhm.
It's two really great, and it's really better. The flavor's better in the evening time when it's cool. But who wants to drink coffee at 6 o'clock in the evening?
Me.
I
Me.
can't do it. I can't
Yeah.
do it, man. It makes it so that my the dreams I have when I'm asleep are off the hook if I drink coffee.
I I don't know why this is, but coffee is so relaxing for me that I can have a cup of coffee just to put me to sleep, and it doesn't need to be decaf. It's just like that's comfort.
Yeah, there's a that like some people take Adderall for ADHD, and for most people Adderall is a stimulant. But if you have ADHD, it calms you down and makes you so that you can focus on stuff. And it's the same thing. I take a medicine called atomoxetine for ADHD, and it's similar, but it just makes me so I can focus. But on the you know drug market, it's like speed.
That's the DC movie The Flash that came out a couple years ago. I'm not a big fan of the DC movies. I need to go see the new Superman movie. I've heard that it's really really good and that James Gunn is taking a different direction than the way that DC has been doing everything. But I always love the visualization of whenever he's going as fast as he goes because that's what I imagine Adderall to be because it's not like it slows anything down. You're still just going 1,000 miles an hour, but you're like, I want to focus on this thing. All right, and then I'm going to focus on this thing. Okay, and then we're going to go right over here. And that is one of the reasons why I'm terrified of being on any kind of stimulants or anything is I just think that it would be way too enticing and I wouldn't be using it for the right reasons.
Yeah, and for me, uh, it's I'm fortunate that I've got a really good relationship with my psychiatrist who prescribes my medicines, and and part of it is the whole NA thing is because I was like, I mean, I'm trying to medicate myself with alcohol and marijuana, and and she's trying to medicate me with all these like conventional psychiatric medicines, but we were completely working against each other.
Yeah.
So every time I would tell her, well, this is how I feel, she has no idea if it's because I'm taking too much of this thing, too little of this thing, or whatever, because my mind is being the primary substances that were altering my state of being were alcohol and marijuana.
Yeah.
There's so once I was like, okay, I'm going to quit using alcohol, and I'm going to quit using marijuana, and I'm going to try and get my head right. Then she was able to dial in my medicines, and I was like, whoa, well, this works. This
Nice.
isn't bad at all.
Yeah. That's I'm still back and forth on the second half. And it's one of those things that I never enjoyed being on just traditional pharmaceuticals. I've never been able to find the right dosage that worked for me. I was never able to find a physician that I could trust. And as soon as, and I really do think that the first doctor did a lot of damage because he was just trying to medicate me and not actually take care of anything. And when he wanted to put me on lithium, I was like, I don't want that. Like, I don't want to be that zonked out all the time. And that seems like all you care about is making me not your problem. And there was enough of a impression in there that I kept seeing anytime people were trying to give me pharmaceuticals that I'm so uh, just opposed to the concept of it. And I know there are some phenomenal pharmaceuticals out there, and I know that there are some great things that once you can figure out your concoctions, that's great. But because I don't trust doctors and I don't trust the pharmaceutical industry at large, I trust a plant that grows out of the ground. And I trust that it helps me sleep. And I trust that it makes me way less of an asshole than 90% of the time. And I also trust that I'm already a paranoid person. So, it's not really doing anything worse there.
Yeah, there's it's so it's so funny, not funny, haha. After World War II, the cutting edge technology as far as psychiatry was the lobotomy, the frontal lobotomy,
Yeah.
and uh, and at VA hospitals all across the country, but predominantly Boston. Boston is the place that was just over the top. They were giving people lobotomies just so that the staff wouldn't have to deal with them. And so, there's but they, from the outside looking in, it's like, oh, well, this person was combative. They were yelling all the time. They were always angry. And now they're just happy. They
Yep.
sit in the corner and they hum a song and so on and so forth. But from the inside out, it had to have been horrible. It had to
Yeah.
have just been horrible to like because all the parts of your brain that that cause PTSD are way too deep. So that frontal lobotomy didn't do anything to the structures of the brain that deal with memory, to the structures of the brain that deal with uh, emotion regulation. All that stuff happens very, very, very deep stem
Yeah.
level of the brain.
You might still be experiencing trauma, but your body is interpreting it as joy, so everybody thinks you're just happy about all this trauma that you're experiencing inside your own mind.
Yeah, and just the parts of your brain that deal with communication. So you can't tell anybody what's going on.
Yep.
And it's yeah, so it was uh and I was on lithium for a little while as well, and that was one of the things that um once I told my doc, I said, I'm not taking this anymore. We need to figure out, something other than lithium. And uh, so we changed my meds, but I was still drinking alcohol and I was still using cannabis, and uh, and then I was like, um, there's it's not fair for me to tell them, well, you can't give me this, but you can give me that. But then to I'm really working against them. I'm not just being a good patient, doing what I'm asked.
Yeah.
There's so that's anyway. That's what and and it's so yeah. It's so funny. There's you know, because cannabis is so prevalent in Colorado. It's just, I mean, there are a dozen cannabis dispensaries within a mile of my apartment.
Oh, not even a mile. Yeah.
Yeah,
Uh, it's
there,
pretty close. You're pretty close to Pearl Street.
there's a there is a lot of cannabis dispensaries, and and you know, like I was going to one that gave veterans discounts, so I was getting like
Yeah.
15% off all the discounts, and so it was relatively affordable. And you know, for some people, it's particularly for people who have substance use disorder, and they're able to not drink alcohol by smoking cannabis, because smoking cannabis is way less risky and harmful than drinking alcohol. I mean, you'll do. I'll just say I have done some really stupid things on alcohol. I mean, like unbelievably stupid, way stupid.
Yeah,
Really
I've
just
done dangerous things on alcohol. I have said stupid shit that I laughed at while high,
yeah, yeah. I
and I didn't
remember
want to go driving.
I remember there's the statute of limitations has passed, so I'll go ahead and tell the story. There's I went to a party, and I put my bike on the bike rack because I knew I was going to get drunk at the party, so I was going to leave my car there and just ride my bike home. Um, well, when I went to leave, I got on my bike and I started trying to ride my bike, and I decided I was too drunk to ride my bicycle. So I put the bicycle back on the rack and drove my car home. And and I woke up the next morning, and I didn't realize I had done that until I went out into the garage, and I was like, uh, uh, whoa, the car's in the garage. How did that happen? And I had to like piecemeal everything. But again, you just you know, once you're drunk, man, it just
Decisions
uh,
come easy.
yeah, stupid is like right next door. So
Yeah,
there's
it's really interesting because the being in the shop, I have a lot of students that come in. You know, Boise State. We're less than 2 miles away from campus, so we have a lot of young people that come into the shop. And college towns are pretty well known for having a lot of bars and going out and partying. And, I hear the stories on Monday mornings about the weekends, and it's always interesting because I'm like, I remember that, and I remember how fun it was. I really do remember how fun it was, but I also don't miss any of it. Not even a little bit. I think the things that I miss are the things that you and I used to do, like having a glass of whiskey, having a conversation, and letting that be a bit of a social lubrication so you can get a little bit more past the okay, this is an awkward conversation. How do we really let ourselves out kind of stuff? And I think that that's one of the things that people struggle with, especially nowadays, is how do you have a sober-minded conversation that can get conflicted, that you're willing to get into the midst of. And when I take alcohol away out of it, it's that much more challenging to have that conversation. And I do kind of miss that because you could get really opinionated in conversations. And like
it
that's the thing that Erica always talks about is whenever she's having conversations with you, she loved like when it would be an hour and a half into the conversation and you'd already had a couple drinks and then you're just like, well, come on now.
yeah, it's in the context of the Supper Talk podcast. There's a you know, Thanksgiving dinner. Once people get drunk, man, you can really start crossing some lines.
Yeah. So what's been on your plate this week?
Okay. So last Friday, uh, I'm in my apartment, and I needed to take an exam. It was a timed exam, So I go, I get to my computer, I get my drinks, I get everything organized so that I can take this timed exam. And I press, take exam. So I start the exam time. And they're all essay questions. So yeah, they're so anyway, as soon as I start on the first question, I hear a really, really faint knock. Um, which was odd because normally if somebody knocks, they knock. So whatever reason, I just thought that I should go check. So I go to the door and I look, and it was a cop, a male cop, walking down the steps away from my apartment. So I'm like, well, that seems a little odd. So I go out in the hallway, and he heard me open the door. He says, "Hello, hello." So I start talking to him, and he starts asking me about the guy who lives directly below me. He's
Okay.
like, he's like, hey, is it normal for that guy to leave the door open on his patio? And I'm like, yeah, he does it all the time. The guy likes plants. He's got like way more plants than you could think would fit into an apartment. He has a lot of plants. Uh, but he so he
Likes fresh
opens
air.
yeah, so he opens up the windows quite a bit, and that south side of the apartment is, I mean, literally 15 feet from the creek. So it's cool, So during the afternoon, there's, especially when you're down there and there's no sunshine, um, it's great to open it up. So that's what I told the cop. Yeah, it's not a big deal. Well, it turned out that they had gotten a report of of gunfire on my block. Somebody shooting. I didn't hear the gunfire, but I had headphones in. Um, there's and apparently there were like a dozen cops in my parking lot because uh, they said that this guy shot a handgun, and then he was like banging on people's doors trying to get into people's apartments. Um, and the cops showed up, and they were looking all over the neighborhood, and then they see my neighbor has his door open. um, so they think, and nobody's answering the door because he wasn't home. So they think what happened is this guy saw the open door, hopped up
Oh,
on
and
his
was hiding in
patio,
there.
and was hiding inside the apartment
Okay.
below me. So I didn't know any of this because I just talked to that cop in the hallway, answered his questions, and then he left. But then I got a text from my other neighbor, the one that's right next door to me, and she's filling in all this other information. So like I'm like, man, well at least there's we were under a shelter in place order,
Okay.
and I was a little miffed, I guess, because I'm signed up for all those emergency notifications from the sheriff. So they've got this thing that you sign up for. You're supposed to get them. So I should have got a text message saying, "Hey, shelter in place."
Yeah, but here you got one better. You got to knock on your door.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm sitting here and I'm like, I keep a hand axe by my door.
Yeah.
So I grabbed the hand axe and I brought it back next to my computer, and I finished taking my test. But I'm like, holy cow. I mean, it's like first there's the King Super shooting, and then there's uh um the guy down on Pearl Street who
Yeah.
tries to
The
set
whole
old Jews on fire. And and then like last week there was a guy who was walking around with a chain and assaulted like 15 people with a chain.
the
And it took him
hell?
3 days to figure out who the guy was. So, and I could go on and on. I mean, there's people getting stabbed all the time, and 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 so like I was figuring I would see something in the newspaper, on Saturday, but it's like there still hasn't been a single article about this guy popping off firearm in downtown Boulder. So I'm like,
Well, you guys don't have concealed carry laws, do you?
Oh my goodness. I mean, we do have concealed carry laws, but it's kind of a moot point because um, you're not allowed to carry in any of the public space. So if you're hiking on a trail, can't carry. If you're in a park, can't carry. If you're walking on the trails that connect the park, can't carry. There's there's it's like when I was living in when I was working in DC and
Yeah.
I was living in Virginia, um, trying to ride the metro with a firearm is it's like because if you go through Maryland, you can't have a firearm at all. You
Yep.
go in DC proper, you can't have a firearm at all. Pentagon City, it's fine. Alexandria, it's fine. So it's like um, it just makes it so that it's impractical that even if you have a concealed carry permit, you can. And the university just made it even worse by saying that you can't carry anywhere on university property. So
That's
yeah,
it's interesting because as much of Idaho politics and laws that I'm not a fan of, that's one that I'm like I want to stay in this state because I know that I can protect myself if I need to. And like I stopped carrying because ultimately I'm skinny enough that I can't conceal properly. I just print way too much, but I do like I have this is the knife in my front pocket. This is the knife in my rear pocket. This is the knife in my other rear pocket. And, it's kind of a joke that, I carry so many, but the whole point of it is I don't know what's going to happen. So I have a daily carry knife to open boxes, and then I have tactical response knives where I can respond to people if I need to respond to people. And if somebody has my primary or my dominant hand, then I have something that I can use with my offhand. And so it's just a matter of I don't mess with me. That's it. Just don't mess with me. It's not that I'm being scary holding these. I don't want you to mess with me. But we had it's kind of a funny story. We have these shower heads that use suction cups onto the side of the shower wall. So there's the main shower head, and then there's a secondary shower head that just shoots your body instead of the top of your head. So they're not the greatest shower heads. When we moved into the space, we're just like, we need different ones than what are here. Let's get something cheap until we get the thing that we actually want to get. And it's like 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning. I am sound asleep, and the suction fails. And all of a sudden, there's this huge crash in the house. I wake up in a panic, and I've got my suppressed flux raider right next to my bedside. Grab it, and I was like, "What's going on?" And Haley's like, "It's the shower head. It's the shower head. You're fine. It's fine. Don't worry about it." And I was like, "There's somebody in the house. There's somebody in the house." She's like, "No, it was a shower head. You're fine." That was a really good response.
yeah.
So
There's and
just the mentality is so different. Like I want to be able to protect the house if somebody's here, and that's the only reason that I have it. It is not to intimidate somebody else. It is not to make it so that way I'm trying to impose my will on somebody else. But if you're gonna mess around, you're gonna find out.
yeah, and it's one of those things that you know, um, case law is really difficult. So you know, there's you have to yeah, it's you have to plan on having to prove that you had to fire your firearm.
Yep.
Even it doesn't matter if you're allowed to carry your firearm, if you've got a concealed carry permit, if you use your firearm, you're going to have to explain why you used your firearm.
And at a
And
bare minimum, you are going to lose that firearm.
yeah, it's so um it's just one of the things that there's so like if you're a civilian and you carry a firearm and you discharge a firearm, you're criminally liable if you did it. If you're there's, it's like the whole duty to retreat. Some states
Yeah.
have duty to retreat. Um, and and there's I don't know if I like duty to retreat as a law, but I certainly like duty to retreat as a principle.
Yep.
That if there's some way for you to get away from whatever is the thing that's causing you to fear for your life, um, uh, or significant health. There's there's if there's some way to get away from that, then you should get away from it. You should take the opportunity, leave, and the very last thing. The only, it's like I could do nothing else except for shoot this guy. That's when you draw your firearm.
Yep.
And uh there's a lot of states. Florida's a good example. There's that you don't have to do that. You can,
No, it's just stand your ground.
yeah, and I think that's crazy. And the reason I think it's crazy is because, it's like I can't. Man, I feel bad now because I can't remember the guy's name. I think it was in Georgia, where he was out on a run, and apparently he was like he used the porta potty at a construction site, and some two guys saw him, and they chased him
I know
down,
who
and
you're talking. Yeah, it was the three guys that chased him, and it was the black guy that was running away, and they got in the truck and actually chased him.
shot him.
It's like
Yeah,
you guys had no right whatsoever to pursue somebody, terrorize him, make him fear for his life, and then gun him down.
yeah. And the problem is when you get all gumptioned up, and you're like, oh man, and all of a sudden you think you have a reason to shoot a guy. Well, once you think you have that reason to shoot a guy, you're like, I may as well shoot the guy, because I got a reason. And it's just, yeah, it always ends up going bad. Um, and but anyway,
So
yeah,
they found
there's
that guy 3 days later, though.
oh the guy with the chain they found 3 days later. They haven't even said anything about the guy who supposedly shot off rounds on my block. Other than they said that there was a guy who shot rounds on my block and that the street was closed. So they put that on their X account. And then the next morning they said the streets are reopened, um, and we'll update the story later. But they haven't said anything at all about it. And this is the thing that kind of gets me is we've got a local newspaper, the Daily Camera. It's a local newspaper, and they used to, like, every day they would uh, print a map or every week they would print a map in the paper and show the locations of crimes in the city on this map. Just a little map, like a weather map or whatever. And they haven't shown that in years now. And it's like there's this narrative that the city and the police department, BPD, tries to push that this is a safe city and that violent crime is down and what they're doing is working and we don't need to worry about it because violent crime is down and what
Yeah,
they're doing
it's
is working.
amazing how if you just don't show anybody a list that nothing exists.
It's exactly right. And there's
There's certainly nothing like that happening on a national level.
yeah, and like the FBI keeps a database of crime, but it's completely voluntary as to whether or not a jurisdiction uploads the crime into the FBI's database. So there's no, yeah, it's really, I could go on about it. Maybe I'll do a what I'm bringing to the table on it one of these days. But
Hmm.
yeah, it's really unfortunate that there's just no way to know um, if there's uh, if there's crime going on in your neighborhood.
Yeah, the only thing that we really have is we have the SO registry, and you can really quickly tell to see if there is somebody who's living in your neighborhood that you'd hope wouldn't live there, and then we have the arrest report. So Florida is kind of interesting because they have laws that allow you to see the mugshots of people, and that's why there's so many Florida man stories, because the laws permit the public to have that. And we have it too. So you can go on the Ada Sheriff arrest report, and all the arrests of the last 5 days are on there, and it's fantastic. It used to be the thing that I would check every morning just to see if I would ever find any friends. Um, and it's this ongoing joke that I know, I know at some point in my life I will get arrested. It's not a matter of like statistically, it's probability. There's going to be some kind of public nuisance. I would imagine it's probably going to be at a protest. There's just in the back of my head, I believe that that will probably exist at some point. So, if anyone sees this happen, I want my mugshot. And I don't know how long I'll be arrested for. It might be more than 5 days. And I need somebody to save that picture. And I'm really glad that Idaho has laws that allow that. Because there have been some of the greatest things. Like Lil Wayne got arrested in Idaho years ago. And it's one of the greatest mugshots that's ever been. There was a band that used to, it was a punk rock band that was formed on a street next to where I used to live, and the street was called Manville. So the band's name was Manville. And what they did is they had stamps, so like rubber stamp with an ink stamp. Uh, and when people would go to shows, they'd get stamped with Manville. So this guy went to a Manville show, got stamped on the forehead with Manville, got drunk, drove home, and got arrested. So there's a DUI picture, and this is an old picture of just a guy who's like,
With
Manville.
Manville. Yeah. There's a. I think we got reversed in the order, but what's on your plate?
Oh, honestly, this week has been kind of crazy. So um, I got my EIN for the indie gallery all set up. And I learned something about the IRS website, which is really, really wonderful. So after we had an entire Department of Government efficiency come through and make everything efficient, and maybe this was the case beforehand, I don't know, but the IRS's website for filling out forms is only available during business hours. So if you're a guy who runs a business during normal business hours, you can't fill out a form on the IRS website on a Saturday or Sunday to get an EIN to start another business. So this has been this whole long going process of trying to turn the indie gallery into its own establishment instead of having it be a DBA under the Barber Story. Because ultimately, I think the indie gallery is actually a lot more scalable. I think it's a business model that can go into other areas, and if I just keep it under the barber shop, then it'll never grow. It'll never actually be able to do the things that I think that it's capable of doing. So I have to do an EIN before I can do my 1023 forms to be able to get 501c3 nonprofit status. But 2 hours ago, I submitted my application for 501c3 non-exempt status, or exempt status, and I am really, really, really hopeful because now I'm just waiting. So once I get the nonprofit status back, then I can start really, really pushing, trying to get artists. And I think that I'm going to wind up doing remember back when we were going to punk rock shows when we first moved to Idaho, and there was
Hmm.
like, it wasn't social media, it was street teams. And
Yeah, yeah, I remember that.
yeah, I miss those days. Like being on a street team for a band, getting flyers and letting people know, like, hey, Secret Lives of the Freemasons are coming to town. Like, here's the flyer to the show. You should go to the show. It's going to be awesome.
They still do
Uh,
that here in Boulder.
well, yes and no. I don't necessarily think that it's the passion of street teams anymore as much as it's guys being paid to hand out flyers.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think that that is where it has become annoying. it's just people handing out flyers for the sake of handing out flyers.
Now
But
we had on my block just like 50 yards, maybe 75 yards to the west of me. There's a small park,
okay,
and they had last week they had a party in that park, and it was just some people who live next to the park. They're like, we ought to do a party here. So they got some music and they went around and they put flyers up all around town, and uh, the whole thing was very, very organic.
that's awesome.
Yeah,
Yeah. And that's what I loved about Street Teams. It was organic growth of bands. And that's very much what I want the indie gallery to be. I want it to be this organic thing that the community can see like, look, this is a love letter for you guys. I'm not trying to make money off of it. I'm trying to give you guys space. So once I get the nonprofit status, I've got a flyer that I've developed that's basically um, bright, vibrant BSU colors, your art, our walls, no fees, the logo, and then on
yeah.
the
I saw you
backside.
did something on social media about that.
Yeah, so basically that post I'm gonna turn into a postcard. Get it? And I'll have a QR code on the back of it, so that way, hey, if you like this, you can do this, but you probably know artist friends, maybe give it to them because you're more likely to give them a cool postcard than share a sponsored link. But once I get those made, I'm basically just going to go down to the arts department at BSU and find people that are already in that space instead of going on. If I go on Facebook or Instagram and try and do targeted ads, okay, I'm going to have demographics of young people. That doesn't necessarily mean people who are actively pursuing art. So if I want to find people who are actively pursuing art, I need to actively pursue artists. And I wish that there were more opportunities to do it, but I'm going to jump on this one because it's going to remind me of being 16 again. And that's kind of the fun thing. So, one of the guys who has been kind of paying attention to all of this and has been giving me a bit of insight from the perspective of a venture capitalist. He came in this week and he's like, "This is really interesting what you're doing here. Like this is all coming together. It's nice actually seeing it put together." And yeah, it's finally at a point now where it is right at it's not even the finish line. It's the finish line to begin the race.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
yeah, and I'm. It reminds me of last year when I did the St. Luke's Fit One race,
Hmm.
and I don't know how I snuck my way to the starting line, but I was like, oh, I okay, you guys are what sub 6 minute? I don't know what I run. I'm just gonna be up here, uh, which that's not where I should have been. But now I'm at the front of the line of this race when the gun goes off, and I feel like I'm just waiting for the gun to go off.
Hmm.
I'm waiting for this opportunity to be like, okay, go. So that's what's going on this week, and now I'm just trying to figure out what our plans are for this upcoming weekend because it's my birthday next week, and I think we're just gonna go
I
do some
was going to say
paddleboarding.
that. Yeah. So before the next episode, you're going to have your birthday. So that's definitely uh, so it's almost going to be like it's a whole year before the next episode.
Ah, yeah. I'll be 39 next time we're doing an episode.
There's actually I keep forgetting. I keep thinking that my birthday's coming up, but it's already gone past. So I'm
No, yeah,
61 now.
you're good at remembering birthdays. That has been your consistency for as long as we've known each other.
Yeah,
Birthday.
it was so funny. And like I used to use your mother and my's anniversary as a passcode for everything.
Oh, I know.
Yeah, because that's the only reason. That's the only way that I could remember it.
Yeah, I was very aware that that was your password to a lot of things. Uh, so, anyways, before we get into our main stuff, we forgot to do something last week that we were doing every single episode of the first season, and I don't understand why I completely spaced. It's probably because we're doing the new format. But table topics. we totally forgot to do this. So, before we get into the main stuff today, as a reminder for the people listening at home, or maybe in your car, or maybe you're on a commute, who knows? We do this thing with a game called Table Topics. It's literally just a deck of cards. They are conversation starters. So, if you don't know how to start a good conversation, these are great places to go with. And they have a family dinner box that we will every now and then be able to get some questions out of. So, today's question, ooh, this is good. What calms you down when you're angry?
This is so funny because I've been going through this uh, uh, with in confession with my priest, uh, because so I have what is a very common symptom for people with PTSD, and it's called an exaggerated startle response. So if something happens that would normally startle someone, like a slamming door, or you're going to put something in the sink and it slips out of your hand and drops. Now that would be startling for just about any people might go, oh, whoa, they might. But if you've got PTSD or some other anxiety related disorders, you can have this exaggerated startle response where like the old there's no sense crying over spilt milk. You'll spill the milk, and before the milk even hits the ground, you're like in a
Son of a bitch.
yeah. It's just really really. So I'm like, okay, now I'm not. That's a symptom of my disorder. So I it's hard to hold yourself accountable for something that's completely involuntary. There's no way for you to so like it's so anyway. But I was noticing that when you're startled, there's a lot of different emotions that can follow the startle. So you can be startled and then be afraid. You can be startled and then sad. You can be, there's a lot of things that on the other side of being startled, you can be. But for me, I was like, every time I get startled, every time something happens that startles me, the emotion that's on the other side of being startled is anger. So so it there's so I've been thinking about it. I'm like, well, it has to be that there is anger, unresolved anger, that is so close to the surface that that it doesn't take much to rub the veneer off and to see what's actually in the on the inside. So then you've got to start asking yourself the question, okay, well, what is it that I'm angry about that that I haven't gotten past? What is it that why is it that this causes me to fly into a rage? And again, there's so I think it's reasonable for me to be startled, but there's you would assume that you would have some once you're like, oh, I just dropped this into the sink. There might be like, oh man, uh, some other emotion than anger. So so then to get back so what calms me down, and recognizing anger, that's what calms me down. So uh, as soon as I recognize anger for what it is, then I can be like, okay, what am I angry about? And I can start thinking through um, uh, the issue, and just that sheer process of identifying it, naming it, and then thinking through it, um, is how I calm myself down. And here's the funny thing: if that sounds like something your therapist would say, it's because of years of therapy that
Mm-hmm.
I'm able to do that. It's like, oh, okay.
Well,
Uh,
it's interesting because So I have a lot of anger issues, and thank you for that. I I have also had many years of therapy talking about anger, and like I I think it's more CPTSD as opposed to just PTSD. And I have a very, very similar response. And that's one of the things that, Haley very frequently will be like, it's okay. You don't need to, this isn't our thing to be that big about. But whenever I'm in that moment, it's like you're saying, you have no control over it. That's just your reaction. And it was something that through therapy, we realized like, we need to separate. Like from in that moment, we just need to separate. Like get away from me because I'm going to be angry and I need to work on it. And I have gotten to a point where I have been able to say that if I'm angry, I need to be by myself because I need to feel the anger. And I'm at a place in life where I don't want to feel the shame of the emotions that I'm feeling in the moments that I'm feeling them because I've had so many years of needing to suppress my emotions. And I think that suppressing my emotions is probably one of the reasons that I have such fucked up emotions. Like you need to feel. We're humans. It's okay to be angry. It's okay to be sad. It's not okay to hold resentment. It's not okay to act maliciously. But if somebody pisses you off and you get angry, it's okay to be angry. What are you going to do with that anger? And one of the things that I've found is if I feel that anger and if I'm just experiencing it, I'm analyzing it the exact same way that you are. I might not necessarily be as like direct with it, but I start thinking about the situation like this is stupid. Why am I so angry at this? Like why am I just here right now? I need to feel this, but what's going on? And it's weird because it's almost like if you let it if you let it happen, it dissipates. But if you hold it in, then it's just pressure, and then it's just pressure, and then it's just more pressure, and it's more pressure, and eventually you will explode. So I've gotten to a point where just feeling it, allowing it to be what it is, and allowing it to be in a more appropriate situation where I can't necessarily uh, allow there to be collateral damage. That I think is probably the way that and I know that there's way healthier ways of dealing with it, but years of therapy, years of practice. It's constant work. But I mean, hell, I can't think of a time that I've ever been slow to anger. Like even in Hawaii, when I was like 13, 14, I was always just so quick to getting angry and so reactionary that I've just kind of always struggled with it.
Yeah, and and for me, it's so funny, you know, uh, not blaming the my job or anything like that, but in the military, to a certain extent, anger is encouraged.
Yeah, it
Uh,
gets stuff done.
yeah. If there's something that was supposed to go a particular way and it didn't go that way, um, an angry outburst is considered an appropriate way of modifying behavior.
Oh, I
Um,
tell you what, after February, everything that happened in the shop, I was angry. I was angry. And I told Haley, I was like, this is the motivation. I am going to be better. I am going to be better because I am not going to let this happen to me. And oh man, anger is such a motivator. And positive, negative, it works.
yeah, there's uh, and yeah, it's so funny. Last week we were talking a little bit about mysticism, and I mentioned some of the early monastics, um, and to a certain extent that was a lot of their desire to move into a monastic community is to get away from all of the things of the world that were making them. They were like, oh well, the this is what the Beatitude said. We wish that everybody would just love everybody and everything would be perfect, but it's not that way. So you end up angry all the time because it's not the way that you imagine this idyllic world to be. So they would go into these monastic communities and uh, and um, and separate themselves from the temptation. It's almost uh, it's kind of funny uh, the Monty Python movie, Monty Python and the Holy Grail, when they go to uh, the monastery with all the nuns, and they're like, "Oh, she's so nutty."
Yes.
It's, there's I don't
I
know
don't
why
need
I started
rescued.
thinking of it, but that's it. Oh, I'm so nutty. You're gonna have to spank me.
Oh, Monty, like it's so funny the age that we were when you introduced that movie to us.
Yeah, yeah. I've always thought that Monty Python there, and when I was growing up, so I was that same age. Their TV show Monty Python's Flying Circus.
Flying Circus, yeah.
Yeah, it was on TV, and
The
uh,
Ministry of Silly Walks.
yeah, they're so. I mean, that I would see that stuff, and I was just like, man, they were so funny. The dead parrot skit, and the Society of Bruces, and all these just like really silly things. And that's what they would do. They were like, I was thinking maybe we ought to do a skit about a dead parrot. And they were like, nobody. I'm assuming that in their creative process, nobody was like, "No, that's too stupid. Nobody will ever laugh at that."
John Cleese is such an interesting guy because I loved his entire career as he was aging and after Monty Python and he was doing other little comedy roles. And if you ever go back and look at any of the little monologues that he was doing with Monty Python, they were so politically relevant to the time. They were very poignant to society. They were putting a mirror right up in front of people and just being absolutely silly and absurd about it. But, looking back in the lens of 40, 50 years later, it's like, oh, you guys said some pretty insightful stuff through all your shenanigans.
Yeah, that really, and it's almost a shame that that comedians now have to be so careful.
I think it's moving back, to be really honest. I don't I really do think that the comedy is the one place where you can have a really good discussion about nuanced issues. And what makes it so challenging is how do you bring that nuance into a joke that is going to be provocative to both sides? One of my favorite comedians is Brian Simpson right now. Brian Simpson and Bill Burr. Oh my God, I love Bill Burr because he pisses everybody off. And he's right. Like 99% of the time, he's right. Liberals are a bunch of pussies and conservatives are a bunch of assholes. Let's talk about it and just be in the reality of that's what the reality is. Um, but Brian Simpson has this really, really great bit on depression because he joined the military in August of 2001 as a lower economic position to be able to get into college, and then 9/11 happened a month later. And what kind of depression does that give somebody? So he has this entire bit that is horrible on wanting to kill yourself by asphyxiation in a garage. It is a joke that made me cry so hard from laughing because it's the exact same plan that I made. And I was like, yeah, you're cutting to it. Like you are getting right into the meat of what needs to be talked about, and you're making people kind of uncomfortable, but you're also making them laugh about it so we can actually have this conversation. I was talking on I was doing my TikTok live earlier today, and there's this whole thing about it's called algo speak. And I hate it. I absolutely hate it. You can't say porn. You have to use corn. You can't say dead. You can't say suicide. You have to say unalived. So you have all of these people that are on social media being like, hey, Epstein didn't unalive himself. And it's like, he didn't kill himself. Like, you can say these things. You can say these things. That is what we're trying to do. But if you just pacify yourself enough so that way you're not hurting people's feelings, you don't get to have a real conversation whatsoever. So this girl was asking me, she's like, "Hey, I don't know why, but your account just got blocked for me." I was like, "Oh, it's because of the shit that I'm talking about. TikTok does this to me all the time. Anytime I talk about the big sad, they get mad at me because I'm talking about things that might happen if you have the big sad."
There's it's when I was young, one of my favorite TV shows was All in the Family, um, that had these two characters. Well, the main character was a guy named Archie Bunker. He
Hmm.
had a wife, Edith. Um, they had a daughter who was married to a guy named Meathead, called Meathead anyway. Um, and it was one of the things that like Archie Bunker was probably one of the by today's standards, he was one of the most offensive, horrible,
Misogynistic,
bigoted,
racist
yeah,
guys.
every bad thing that a person could be was rolled up into that character of Archie Bunker. And Gene Carroll, the actor that was behind it, did such a wonderful job of 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 making that character that crazy uncle, that person that's in your family that 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 everybody had, particularly in the 1970s. Everybody had somebody in their family that was a racist. Everybody had somebody in their family that was a sexist. You know, I mean, it was just so everybody knew somebody that was like Archie, and that's part of what made that character so endearing and so lovable.
He was
And
relatable.
yeah, and it really weird how the show evolved in that uh, Edith died, and
Spoilers.
yeah, yeah, spoiler alert, and Archie um, started a bar and adopted a foster child.
Okay.
And so so all of the veneer of, you know, uh, anti rhetoric that was the Archie Bunker character melted away when he went through the trauma of losing the one person in his life who kept him sane.
It's the character arc. It's not where you're at this part of the story. It's the whole story.
Yeah, and there's but but there's I mean, TV used to be able to do that, and it wasn't just All in the Family. There was Sanford and Sons.
Well,
There was
even recently, ABC had a show called Modern Family, and it was about three different families, and it was very, very different families. One was a gay couple who had an adopted daughter. One was a mixed race family, and one was Ed Harris, who's like way older than his wife. And Ed Harris's character is really interesting because I think the show ran for like 10 seasons, and we watched it right after the last season aired. So we were able to go through the entire thing and get the entire story in one sitting. And in the beginning, it's like, ABC did this within the last 12 years? Oh, okay, yeah, I guess a lot of the movement has been more recent. So, wow, this show started this way? This is pretty horrible. Um, but then when we got to those later seasons and you see Ed Harris's character really shift into this person who's very loving of the other families and is very much uh, the reform that you would hope to see out of somebody, you realize like how far people can come and that people do have the ability to change. And that's kind of what these stories are supposed to say. It's not about canceling who they were, it's allowing them to become who they can become.
Yeah, because that's the way our life works. I mean, you don't
Yeah.
you there if you've got an uncle that's that way, or a dad that's that way, or whatever. There's you don't get to just flip a switch and make them not be the way that they are.
No, I think our story is probably really, really indicative of that. I mean, it took probably a good close to 10 years for us to repair. And it was not easy. It took a while, but I love where we're at now. I didn't love where we were 8 years ago. I didn't love where we were 9 years ago. Where we're at now is such a good place that this is the thing that you have to be able to have the time frame to recognize, like, you got to work on it. You can't just give up on people. This is why, and this is again coming back to comedy, this is why I think cancel culture is slowly moving away unless you're Stephen Colbert. Um, in which case, in which case, good luck, Jimmy Kimmel and Jimmy Fallon. I wish you well. Jon Stewart, fare thee. Uh, but as far as getting canceled for something you say, I mean, Louis C.K. is doing touring again. So I think that people are starting to get to a point where they can be a little bit more forgiving. I hope. I hope.
Yeah, and I tend to think that like Colbert, at least as I understand it, he was losing a lot of money, and I think a lot of people are just really getting tired of. I mean, it's like every late night comedian does the same shtick. They're trying to be some version of uh, Weekend Update from SNL. They're trying to do some kind of a news, make themselves out to be a news organization. And then the other thing they're doing is just being this echo chamber of liberal politics, um, uh, and and uh, and the demographic that those shows reached are trying to reach, um, is shifting in a very different direction. So
See,
young
I
men are becoming more conservative in their political leanings and less, um, and not just conservative in terms of like politics, but conservative in terms of the whole issue around wokeism.
see, and I don't necessarily think that it is uh a mouthpiece or it's them trying to be the news. I do recognize that those late night shows see themselves as entertainment. I've never thought that John Oliver was the news. I think that his main story is a really interesting main story because it's never about anything that is a current topic. It's something that they've done a deep dive on. I think Jon Stewart is probably the closest to news, but it's still very much candy coated, sparkly goodness. But late night has always done that. I mean, Jay Leno has always made fun of politicians. Conan O'Brien always made fun of politicians. Dave Letterman always made fun of politicians. So, like, late night hosts making fun of the current administration is not unique to Trump.
Yeah, but
Um,
there's, I mean, Jay Leno was always, I mean, he had Arnold Schwarzenegger on.
mhm,
Before him, Johnny Carson had Ronald Reagan on several
mhm.
times. Um, and but it's what it's become, and it's every single one of them. This is why I'm like, okay, I can see canceling three or four and not changing the 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 lineup too much, because every single one of those guys is the exact same shtick. There's no daylight between Jimmy Kimmel and Steve Colbert and John Oliver. They're all doing the exact same thing, and the guys who are really funny, Joe Rogan and um, uh, uh, they're the real comedians aren't doing that. And it used to be like the thing. So like Jay Leno's a good example. Jay Leno was a stand-up guy. That's what he did. He did stand-up comedy. And when he landed the Tonight Show, that's the stand-up comic that has really arrived. So if you're a stand-up comic and you can get to be a late night show host, then you're doing the exact same thing that you were doing. You just don't have to travel around the country doing it, and you have a staff of writers to support you. The only other thing that stand-up comedians would do, Ellen's a good example, Roseanne's a good example. They do TV shows, they do sitcoms, um, and the stand-up comic would become a sitcom star, but then they're contributing to the writing, but they're telling the story that the producer and the director and the people behind the show want to
And
want to
and I
say.
can see where you're coming from with that, but the argument that I would make is I would say that there is no one who is willing to say the emperor has no clothes that's on the team of the emperor. And even under Biden, you have these people that are talking out to liberal policies, still making fun of a guy who shouldn't have been in office. So when they're able to speak out against their own party, it's fine. But when they're speaking out against the current administration, it's all the same mouthpiece. And there's not a conservative voice that's actually willing to speak out and at least make some kind of a joke. We can make jokes about Epstein. We can make jokes about that because you ran on it. Come on, like this is hilarious. Shane Gillis is a perfect example. He did the ESPY Awards a couple days ago, and he's like, "Oh, I didn't write this joke, but there's supposed to be an Epstein joke in here, but I guess they deleted that too. That's okay. We can just move on from that. Nothing to worry about this, huh, America?" And that's phenomenal. You have somebody who is on that side of the team, who has been supportive of the team, criticizing their own team. That's what's important about comedy. The problem that I have with what's going on with Colbert right now is how much the president is celebrating someone getting fired after that person was critical of him specifically. That to me is way worse type of cancel culture than people canceling comedians for not liking it. If a government official, and very specifically the leader of our nation, is putting in words to celebrate someone's firing, encouraging networks to silence the voice of other people that are opposition because nobody on his own team is actually willing to speak out against him, that's horseshit to me. And I think that is where there's a little bit of a problem with late night. Now, having said that, do I think Colbert is losing money? Yeah, but I don't think that has anything to do with his lack of success. I just think that has more to do with the fact that you don't have people that are watching TV the way that we grew up watching TV. Podcast formats, long conversation formats, being able to get context and not having this whole shell of entertainment. Because I know that the three guests that you're having on tonight, whoever they are there to promote whatever bullshit they're there to promote. And they're going to talk really, really happy, and it's going to be all candy coated and fun, but it's not real conversations. And kind of going back to what we were talking about last week with people needing to have purpose and having a little bit more meaning and them losing community by not having religion, I think that people are trying to find things that are a little bit more tangible. So I would argue that the vast majority of people are paying more attention to Shane Gillis's podcast than Stephen Colbert's late night show, because they're required to stay up late, and my bedtime's 9:45. So I worry that late night is gonna go away just because that's the changing of the tide that's happening to begin with. But what'll be really interesting is what happens to them after the fact, because like Conan O'Brien, he does a podcast now. Jon Stewart, like he's doing the Daily Show, but he also does his podcast. So, if Stephen Colbert does goes from CBS and does essentially the Colbert Report on a podcast, people will watch that, and then he will be less guided by the platform of CBS and the people that are running him. And you don't need a staff of 200. You need maybe a staff of 15 or 20. Like the two of us are doing this and it's okay. Imagine if we had 15 people behind us.
Yeah. There's Rogan's a good example. He's got Jamie,
Yeah.
and the same thing with Sean Ryan. I can't remember the name of his producer, but yeah, there's so just having somebody to uh, even if they're not running the cameras. I think sometimes what they do is they've just got a video mixer, so they don't have camera people manning the cameras.
Yeah.
They've just
Camera one, camera two, camera one,
yeah,
camera two.
yeah, and they just press a button to go from. So, but having a producer, somebody to do that mixing, somebody to find information out and speak it into your ear, uh, all that. You know who I think does a really great job is Theo Vaughn. There's
He's an interesting guy because he does not care about social norms.
and like he grew up in a Pentecostal church, and he used to be a Christian musician, and 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 he just wears all this stuff. He's just like, yeah, this is where I was at the time, man. There's and
I still think him talking to Trump about doing cocaine is probably one of the funniest interviews I have ever seen. And more specifically, like he's describing cocaine to a man who existed in Wall Street in the 80s as though he doesn't know what cocaine is.
yeah, but I mean that's there. I mean, I take President Trump at his word that he's never he
Oh,
doesn't
no, no, no.
drink.
I, I, I'm not saying that he's done cocaine. I'm not saying that whatsoever. I'm saying he was probably around a lot of people who did cocaine.
Yeah, and that's the thing that I thought that Theo Vaughn did a really good job of in that interview is uh, because Trump doesn't talk about his brother very much, um, and I think it's a shame that he doesn't talk about his brother that much because he it was such an impactful person on his life, and he says he's like, hey, my brother told me not to drink because it destroyed his life. I watched it destroy his life, so I just didn't want anything to do with it because of my brother. And I think that what that did in that interview is it by not talking about politics, by not talking about any of the things that everybody wants him to ask questions, he actually was able to get Trump to let his guard down and to talk more naturally and um, more sincerely about his own life.
Yeah,
But anyway,
I I just have no way of being able to be close enough to see anything other than the personality that he presents, and it's one of those things that you can never get past your first impressions. I hope that one day he can get past that first impression, but it has just been consistent for me.
yeah, there's and that's there's so funny, people say that Trump is unpredictable, but I think he's one of the most predictable people in there. It's very easy to think uh what he's you might not be able to guess that he's going to put a 15% tariff on Japan. You might not be able to guess the number in the nation, but you can guess that he's gonna use uh, the threat of way unreasonable tariffs to negotiate a much more fair trade balance wherever he's negotiating it.
Yeah, I think that the thing that you can always anticipate with him, he's gonna go to 100 before he goes to 10.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's just but there's he's this was his deal when he was running against Hillary Clinton. This was the problem that I had with him. I'm like, the dude's a used car salesman, man. I mean, he but he's that way with everything. He sells real estate that way. He sells steaks that way. He sells everything that he sells is just over the top. So it's hard to know what he's sincere about because he's
Yeah.
so insincere in his hyperbole.
And that's the issue that like, and especially like the whole neurodivergency thing and not being able to deal with subtleties, like who you are is who you are to me. And I don't deal at all with people who are insincere. And especially where I'm at in my life now, there have been enough people that have fucked me over. There's been enough heartache in my life that if you're not a sincere person with me, I have zero patience and tolerance for you. And if I see your insincerity hurting other people, it just infuriates me. So I think that this is one of the reasons why I've been telling everyone in the shop. I have kind of leaned in with this after the summer break. I've leaned into absurdism, and I very much am okay with knowing there are very few things that I can change. There are very few. Perfect example. Today, RFK was at the state capitol. RFK met with Governor Little, and there was a protest at 11:30 to be at the Capitol steps. My buddy who works for NPR, he and I were talking about it yesterday. And I was like, "Hey, are you going to go down to this?" And he's like, "I mean, I'm covering the legislature anyway, so I'm going to be down there." And he texted me earlier today to see if I was going to go down, and I said, honestly, I'm not, because what I want to do is I actually want to be the change that I want to see in the world. So I'm going to continue using this Wednesday to fill out my nonprofit application because I can make actual change with that. I can do things that I can actually see impact. And what am I going to go do? Hold a sign that says RFK cure my autism? Like, because that's what I would do. And ha ha ha, it'd be funny, but all I'm doing is just bitching for the sake of bitching, and that does nothing. And this is the problem that I have with a lot of people on the progressive movement is I get it, you're angry, you need to be angry, you need to voice your opinion, go make change. Go do the things that you actually want to see. Go listen to what your mom told you when you were 7 and be the change that you want to see in the world.
So on that note, being the change you want to see in the world, what do you bring into the table this week?
Uh, it's kind of interesting. You're touching on it a little bit. So last week I had brought, we were talking about the decline of religion in America among the youth, and when I was originally trying to think of what I wanted to bring to the table this week, I wanted to piggyback on that, and I started looking up what the rates of anxiety and depression were in the same time frame of losing religion. And I really wanted to see if there was some kind of correlation with loss of faith and, hey, we replaced it with anxiety and depression. Um, and what sparked this is I actually came across a statistic last week about the suicide rates in the veterinary community. And didn't know about that. It's a really, really unfortunate thing about how much higher the suicide rate is in veterinarians than the other part of the medical industry, just because of the context of what it was they were doing. So I started thinking of like, okay, what are a lot of the things that I wanted to go into? And ultimately it was shame and depression. These were some of the things that were the underlying issues of what I kind of wanted to follow up on. And then through this entire process, I got writer's block. So this is what I'm coming up with you instead. And I wanted to talk to you about something that is related to you and your past, and like the photo on your or the picture on your wall is your self-expression and it's from your artistic period. And there is a there's an ongoing joke that I've had for the last year, and I've been trying to figure out how to bring up this conversation with you because this is just going to be kind of a fun conversation, I think. So I've made a couple of videos where I've teased on this, but I kind of want to tell the story of how it is that I just signed up for OnlyFans. So, hey, Dad, I'm on OnlyFans. So, the story actually starts back about a year and a half ago. A buddy of mine who is a couple years older than me, we were out filming a documentary down at a park. And we were talking about how he was getting all of these requests on social media. And it's from all of these girls that are asking for his credit card information. And my buddy is, I think he's 42 at the time, grew up very, very, very conservative. He grew up Mormon, very, very large family. So if you're Mormon and you hear what I'm about to say, please forgive me. So he is like, so what's up with this? Like I've never heard of this before. I was like, yeah, that's kind of the modern day thing. It's no longer you go and look up stars. People just do that now, and they own it for themselves. It's whether it's the sexual revolution or it's just empowerment, you can make money just doing that now. And he's like, well, how do I get into that? Like, oh, you don't. You don't. You're middle aged. You're not attractive anymore. You've lost that opportunity because you are not young and nubile, and nobody really wants to pay to see you naked anymore. So you're going to have to figure out your niche. So he asks the obvious question, how do you find your niche? And I say, oh, that's actually really, really, really easy. It's easy to find your niche. It's hard to commit to your niche because the thing that you do is find whatever you're the most ashamed of. Find whatever you are the most ashamed of, and I guarantee you somebody else has that exact same shame, but they're doing something very different with that shame than what you're doing with that shame. So if you do that, you have found your niche, and that's how you go into it. So he's like, okay, so how do you find how do you know what your niche and your shame is? It's like, well, I mean, you're easy. Do you still have your garments? And he's like, excuse me? Yeah, man, like you're easy. You're not a part of the church anymore, but that's how you were raised, right? So that's deeply inside of you. So you can look at it from this perspective. You have this wonderful beard. It comes down to like your solar plexus, and in Western society, beards are kind of looked at as a sign of wisdom and sage advice, and some might even call them an elder. I don't know who would say that, but you don't even need to reveal anything about yourself. You could just be like nose down, beard, and then just that nice satiny garment that has the little embroidery right here and just a little bit of chub downstairs. And all of a sudden you have turned into Elder Johnson. And he looks at me like, do you understand how indoctrination works? Like, I'm really uncomfortable having this conversation with you right now. It's like, exactly. That's the point that I'm trying to make. That is your shame. So if you can embrace your shame and recognize what that shame did to you and just kind of own it, then that's your niche. And that's how you capitalize off of it. And that's how you can kind of own it for yourself. But there's a lot of self-discovery in that you kind of have to do. So he asks me, all right, Chris, what's your shame? I was like, oh, dude, I was homeschooled with unfettered access to the internet. I had 4chan. I don't have shame. I have literally the worst of the worst that lives on up here. There is nothing that you could do that would freak me out. One, because of what I had access to, and two, I own a barber shop. Can you imagine? I have what's known as the shop phone, where if people ask me to look things up and I don't want that in my phone's history, there's the shop phone. So then we can at least talk about what we're talking about, but I don't have to deal with any of that following me home. So he's like, you really don't have anything at all. No, no, not that I can think of. Like if people are into things that I'm not into, that doesn't bother me because as long as it's consenting adults, I don't care. I'm not going to, as the kids say, yuck someone else's yum. So that conversation stuck in my head for weeks, literally weeks. I was thinking, what is the shame that I hold? how can I identify something that is so shameful, and especially in like that kind of world? Um, and it was a bit of introspection. I really started thinking, is there something that's shameful to me specifically, or is there maybe something shameful to my generation that I was a part of? And that's when I think the reality was, because growing up, we had Paris Hilton, and when Paris Hilton made the video that kind of made Paris Hilton a little bit more famous than just being the hotel mogul's daughter, um, every single friend that we had parents that said, if you do anything like that, and if your face gets on the internet, if your name is associated with what you do, that will follow you for the rest of your life, and you will never be able to get anything out of it. Um, and there was this huge weight that now, if anybody were to test those waters, that will follow you for the rest of your life, and it'll be horrible. So now our generation is seeing this next generation not only move into this space, but make more money than we have been able to make in our entire lifetime, be able to put their name to it, and then be able to get like marketing deals for legitimate products. Like the ease of going into the world when we were told it'll destroy you. So I think what the shame is anonymity. We as a generation don't have the same empowerment of going out there. We have this shame of trying to be anonymous. So I started applying that towards myself. And I was like, okay, so I want to be able to do things anonymously. That is the goal. I want to be able to do things and have them not be related to Chris. I want to be able to have this other persona. I want to have a secret life. I can't do that. And I can't do that because I have tattoos. And the world today doesn't allow me to escape that. I have zero capability of having any anonymity in the online world, and especially in a world where there's AI recognition. And anyone can see this caribou on the left side of my neck and will be able to immediately identify me because of a caribou on the left side of my neck or a moose on the right hand? So I started thinking, okay, how can I pretend to be anonymous? Because that's technically what a fetish is. A fetish is the fantasy of pretending something that you're not having, and this is what people live in these spaces, is the world of fantasy. So, okay, if I wear a mask, I'm pretending to be anonymous, and that in itself is an expression of being able to find the anonymity. So whole deep dive into the introspective self of, if I wear a mask and do these things, then I can say that I've done them and I've been able to destroy my shame. And it is a practice of self-awareness and removing shame from an internal place. I'm trying to just release this weight of myself. So this is all the backstory into I signed up for an OnlyFans. So we I obviously first talked to Haley about, hey, parameters. What are you okay with? What are you not okay with? I don't want you to be involved in this. I don't want this to be explicit material. I literally want this to be an art project for me. I'm not, and I really am looking at it as the human form. I'm not trying to do anything that is explicitly sexual. I am not trying to do anything that is um, overtly perverse, as it were. But there are these things that I'm trying to express of artistic nature to be able to have personal development and growth, if that makes sense. So the conversation that I wanted to have with you, so my friend Jenny and I have been kind of building this plan around what it is that I want to do. And the questions that I wanted to ask you, because you have been in a place where you have been an artist and you have been able to express yourself, and you've done it in a way where you were doing it for personal growth. And I'm also in the middle of building an art gallery that I'm trying to take capitalism out of the question. And I want people to be able to have an opportunity to express themselves in a way that they are. There are many ways that I could express myself and be able to do this. And I could choose any number of platforms to be able to do this. There's Patreon, there's X, there's plenty of places that I could do it. But the reason that I want to choose OnlyFans is because it is a platform that I can make money off of the art. So the question is, do you think that art can still be considered art when it's presented on a platform that doesn't value the art in the way that the artist views the art? And separately, does the recognition of capitalistic gain on a platform diminish the value of self-expression to the artist when the end user is not going to view it in the same context as the creator?
Um, I tell you the thing that that it makes me think of um, is there's an art gallery down here on Pearl Street, and they do weekly drop-ins where you can just go in with your pencils and and start sketching, and and um, and it's also drop in for the models. So so you go to this art studio, and somebody is posing nude, and there are people um, who are sketching that nude body.
Okay.
Uh, and and this kind of art has been
Centuries.
yeah, yeah. I mean, for a very
It's the
long. I mean,
human form. It's David.
yeah. I mean, if you even look at the movie Titanic, there was the scene where
Oh, I'm well aware of the scene in Titanic.
yeah. So
I'm pretty sure everyone my age is very aware of the scene in Titanic.
so but that's the thing, and so there's might it be some kind of fetish on the part of the model? Could be. You know, maybe they get some kind of sexual gratification from being nude in front of people.
Like just exhibitionism.
Yeah, it could be. So, you know, something like that. Or it could be that they too are an artist, and this is the other piece. Drawing the human body is really challenging,
Yep.
and it's, you know, there's uh lighting and what you can see and what you can't see, and it's so funny. You'll see people who will get up from where they're sketching, and they'll walk to another perspective and then go back to where they're sketching,
To
just
see the
so
differences in lighting.
they know what they're not seeing
Yep.
from where they're at. And it's a really really um, a great way to learn how to uh, sketch realistic um, portraits. And and there's, I mean, there are nudes in museums that, again, you know, when you start thinking about immaterial substance, well, one of the things that we have in this world that is of immaterial substance is beauty. And beauty is, now I would say that most pornography is not beautiful.
No, it's perversing the human form.
Yeah, there's but there is a whole lot of nudity and risqueness that is beauty. It is transcendent, and it's so, I mean, just in terms of OnlyFans, I would just wonder if that would be a market. The market would be people who want to uh, sketch nudes, and and the way to the way to provide a service to that market would be to have first have a body that's interesting that people would want to draw, and I think uh, to a certain and this is interesting because a lot of the people that drop in for these things, and maybe this, I don't know why it is, but a lot of people aren't particularly fit. They're not
Right.
particularly young. They have folds, and the artist has to figure out how to realistically portray this person based upon what they're seeing in front of them. There's but part of having a tattooed body is you've placed all these items of interest onto your body,
Hmm.
and sketching a tattooed body would be I think more difficult than just sketching a body that's not tattooed, because there's the beauty of the structure, but then there's the beauty of what is superimposed onto the structure. So you have to deal with the lighting, the folds, shadows, all that stuff. But in the midst of all that, there's also a caribou on the neck. There's all this other stuff, and and um, there, and I think that would be a really interesting, because the people that would be subscribing to the OnlyFans account would be people who would want to, on a weekly basis or whatever, or on demand. I don't know how it works. Um,
That that's definitely not going to be the people who subscribe on that platform.
maybe not. You never know. There's
Well, so and that's kind of that's the question. So there are other platforms. Like there's a platform called Patreon. And Patreon and OnlyFans, the difference is, what's your art? Is your art, or is your art naked? And it really is like, OnlyFans is the place where if you want to make adult content, you can make money making adult content on OnlyFans. But if you're on Patreon, it is because you've already had an established following, and those are supporters who want to continue supporting you. So it kind of is a view of, how do you want to make money on your art, and do you want to potentially compromise the values of the art based off of the platform of delivery? And this is where my mentality is like, I could do Patreon, and I think with Patreon, the kind of people that you're talking about, that is the following that I would get. Hey, I'm going to be available. I will be doing nude modeling. So if you want to be able to do sketching, this is available for you. And I will be doing live streams from X to X. And this is the reason that I want to be doing it. Whereas over here, I know what most of those people are paying for, and it has nothing to do with sketching.
Yeah.
Um, but I know that I will probably be able to make more financial benefit. So at the end of the day, if I'm doing the exact same action either way, is it changing do you feel that it changes the integrity of the art, knowing that I'm trying to sell it to people who don't appreciate the art?
Um, well, I mean, again, it all boils down to what you view as art. We were talking earlier about DC movies, um, and I remember when I was young, I would go to your great grandpa's house, and um, uh, your uh, uncle. No, I guess he was my uncle, so he would be your great uncle Dave. Uh, had had hundreds hundreds of comic books from the 1950s when he was growing up. So he had all the Superman, all the Superboys, all the Batman, all the Green Lantern, all the Daredevil, all these just wonderful, wonderful um, uh, comic books. And you know, at the time, um, you know, people looked down on comic books. They looked there. It was very much, no, this is never going to be art. It's like Sunday comics in a magazine form. Um,
Meanwhile, I have an entire wall of them.
yeah, yeah, and you know, graphic novels are now uh, very much an art form, and and uh, and and if you go back and you look at those old comic books, nothing changed. The only thing that
Mm-mm.
changed was the attitude of the people looking at it. But the but the bodies of these superheroes and supervillains were so um, well drawn and so detailed, and you know the musculature was so you know very very well done, um, and all that was done in the context of a spellbinding story. So it was really interesting. So so I would say that comic books are art, you know, but a lot of people would say comic books are not art. Um,
Have I ever told you about aphantasic and hyperphantasia?
mm-mm.
So when I say think of an apple, what do you see in your head?
I see a red delicious apple. That's the species of apple that if I'm just thinking of an apple, I think of the red delicious apple.
So I always use this example because I see the letters APPLE.
Ah, cool.
I Yeah, no, it's not. It sucks. It sucks a lot. It's good for some things, but I can't read fantasy. Like I can't read fiction at all because it's the way I describe it is like let's say you have a brand new Mac Studio, specced out everything like you do, only not the studio. And I'm still running the Acer PC that we built in Hawaii in '98, and we're trying to watch the same YouTube video. You're just watching it, and I'm trying to read, and it's still buffering. So I get so confused because those worlds don't come to life. Like I don't think in pictures whatsoever. Meanwhile, Haley is on the other side of the spectrum. She not only sees the apple, she sees the shading of the way that the light hits it. She sees the green leaf coming off of the stem. She can describe it, and you can give her the smallest amount of detail, and she paints worlds in her head, and she has hyperphantasia. So that's the spectrum of being able to visualize in your head. So I had a really hard time reading, and comic books was the only thing that actually made those worlds come to life for me. So one of the things that I've been able to really appreciate now that graphic novels are starting to be recognized as the actual art form that they are is a bunch of literary classics are finally getting adapted into ways that I can read. So I have like George Orwell's 1984. I've got Vonnegut's Slaughterhouse-Five. So like there's a bunch of books that I just never had access to reading that now, oh cool, I was able to read Animal Farm. That now all of these references I've heard my entire life are starting to make sense to me.
That's there's I mean I think I've mentioned it before, but you know my real interest is my academic interest is in developmental psychology, and in particular uh, the development of identity. Um, and so I've been thinking about identity and researching identity for a while, and and there's really on our inside, we are creatures in dialogue, and the aspects that we use for our internal dialogue are threefold. There's cognition, the way that we think. There's affection, the way that we feel, and there's conation, the motivation, the will that fuels our desires.
Okay.
And those three aspects of self are the dialogue we have inside of our being, whether that being is a soul, a spirit, a mind, whatever. Um, and so what you're talking about is cognition, the way that someone thinks. Now, some people think visually, and and some people when they're thinking through something, they'll see that thing inside their head. Other people think in words. So as you're thinking about something, you're literally saying, "Oh, well, I wonder if this is okay. Maybe I should go check this thing out. Maybe I should do this. I wonder if this is okay. That doesn't seem like it's right." All those words are taking place on the inside of
Yeah.
our head. And it's so interesting that that type of cognition affect it has a direct impact on our affection and our conation. Um, because there's if you think visually, you are likely to desire visually. If you think audibly, then you're likely to desire audible feedback, things that like being told that was a really good idea, as opposed to seeing the results of that good idea flourish. Those are different ways of cognition. Anyway, it just made me think of of that people think differently, and and I think that's one of the things about, to get back to the art. um I think that's how artists train their mind, is they've got to be able to take kind of a photo with their eye, and then translate that photo that they took with their eye through their brain and out their fingers onto the sketch pad. Um, and it may be something that maybe there's a drop-in art studio somewhere in Boise, and go try it. See if it's something that scratches an itch for you. Um,
Yeah. No,
but
and it's interesting because I had never even considered that as an option, but I mean it's the exact same outlet.
yeah, the difference is, like, if you had an OnlyFans thing, you might be naked in a room masturbating, whereas in this case, you'd just be naked in a room sitting there. And
See, that's the thing. I am not going to be naked in a room masturbating. Like that is the whole point of it. I'm not trying to do anything explicitly sexual. Literally, it's modeling for the sake of modeling, doing some funny things. We were joking about. Uh, I know my demographic, and I know what would be the likelihood, and I was like, I could just do a cooking show, and it would be the funniest thing in the world. Of I'm wearing a mask, nobody knows it's me, and I'm using the Traeger to smoke meats, and it's just me in an apron, and occasionally you're gonna catch me naked. That's it. It literally is not a matter of me wanting to do anything explicitly sexual. It is an ongoing joke of, yeah, I'm naked on the internet, whatever. I'm going to own that because I was told that I'm not allowed to own that. And that's more of what the art is for me, is being able to build myself into the person that I want to see myself be. I want to be somebody who is not afraid of the things that once shamed me. So it's a process of going through and building this entire project around how can I make that happen and do it the way that I want to do it. I think that that's one of the things that Rick Rubin has been talking a lot about is he does not do things for the audience. He is not doing things because he knows what they want. He does it because he wants it to exist. And because he wants it to exist, somebody will validate that it was a good thing and that it was good art. For me, the art is the process. The art is making the thing happen and the growth that comes through the process. I think that that's what a lot of artists like to experience through that self-expression is how can I grow through this artistic expression? And for me, it would probably be a silly venture, but the growth that I would get out of it, I think, is where the value comes.
Yeah, and I think that's probably, there's a very similar story that many of the models that do the drop-in sketching. I mean, it's like just on the other side of the mall, um, and 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 that's what it is. It's drop-in, so you just show up, and whoever's there, you just sketch whoever it is, and the studio kind of maintains a list of who's going to be the artist just to make sure, or the model, just to make sure that there's a model there. And sometimes there's more than one model. Sometimes they'll have like three uh, nude models, and they're all three sitting there, and you kind of decide which one of them you're going to sketch. Um, and there's so yeah, maybe that to me that is the kind of I think that's tremendous art, um, and just in and of itself, and and it's a very critical um, skill for artists to be able to to do that. And certainly people um, uh, can just take a picture and sketch from the picture, but there may be a kind of a different thing. Oh, this is a live sketching thing. I don't know how you would uh, do the, oh, they can walk around to see the other side. I guess it would be possible to stream from multiple cameras. I just don't know how that would be done technically. But yeah, there may, like I said, there may even be a drop-in studio somewhere in Boise that does that, on every third Tuesday or something like that.
Well, instead of you continuing encouraging me to get naked, what are you bringing to the table?
Okay, so I'm going to kind of continue on what I did last week as well. So
On China.
no, now I'm coming back to America,
Okay.
and because really what China does, it is that's for Chinese people to worry about. Um, I mean, we need to worry about it in that they are a competitor, and if we want to compete, we need to compete. Um, but the challenges that we have as a nation are our own challenges, the things that we're doing to ourselves. So today I'm going to trace a centuries long, hopefully I'll be able to cover it fairly quickly, but a centuries long arc in American capitalism. And so I have to kind of set the stage. Um, so so uh, I'm gonna begin. Hang on, I'm bringing up my thing. Uh, I'm gonna try and tell it.
That's what I'm going to be doing too.
Yeah, I'm gonna uh, uh, I'm gonna try and tell this story of what I call corporate betrayal in the United States in 5 acts. So transitions that the United States has gone through that tell the story of the kind of capitalism that exists in the United States today, which is
Now,
very different. Go ahead.
out of curiosity, is this in depth enough that we might want to do this as a two-parter?
I don't think so. If I start going
Okay.
on too long, then just
No, no, no. I'm just curious because 5 acts.
Yeah.
This is the struggle that I have with you being a full-time academic and me working. I'm like, oh, what am I going to talk about? Ah, being naked on the internet. Oh, what's Dad going to talk about? A century's worth of information.
Yeah. Well, Act 1 is the big time frame because Act 1 goes from the 1860s to the 1970s. So we're talking
Okay.
about 100 years. And but it's how the American economy was developed, and that's really important, right? Because this during America's Industrial Revolution. So we're talking about the 1860s to the 1890s. Most corporate structures were pretty simple. They were family owned businesses, they were limited partnerships. Their primary focus was on production efficiency, being able to make the thing that they make more quickly or in greater quantities or whatever. Um, and and they took their profits and they invested their profits in market expansion. So they had a great um, uh, you know horseshoe manufacturing company in Boston, and they wanted to take that horseshoe manufacturing company to the entire East Coast. So that was the the early part of the American Industrial Revolution. But that kind of changed. All right. So we went from family businesses, a lot of family businesses that were very, very successful, brands that are still known to this day, but the brands are no longer owned by the family. Now the brands are owned by some corporate entity that has no
Probably
connection.
BlackRock and State Street.
Yeah, yeah. There's no connection to the original family that did it. But that focus on here, I'm going to do my business, and I'm going to try and do my business as good as I can and reach as many people as I can with it, changed. And it changed in the late 19th century and the beginning of the 20th century. And it saw the rise of these massive corporate trusts and monopolies. This age was dually known. So there's two, you'll see it in history books labeled as two different things. Sometimes you'll see it labeled as the Gilded Age or the Golden Age of America.
Yep.
And but at that same time is also known as the robber baron era because there were these
We're
industrial.
watching The Gilded Age on HBO right now, and it's about this time frame, and it's about the train moguls in old money New York and new money New York. It's fascinating. So for anybody who wants to listen to what he's about to say, there's a show on HBO. You should watch it. Third season's on right now. Anyways,
Yeah, so there were these industrial titans, names, people, human beings who by the
J.P.
sheer
Morgan Chase.
that J.P. Chase, John D. Rockefeller, Andrew Carnegie, all these guys that had sacks and stones the size of bowling balls, and
Yep.
they were they
And we're willing to make very, very cunning
yeah.
decisions.
So they consolidated entire industries. There was this fundamental tension in between short term profit interests and building these huge monopolies. Robber barons engaged in some of the most ruthless competitive practices and worker exploitation ever. And it was hallmarked by extreme wealth concentration, um, harsh working conditions for people, and and this corporate philanthropy that was used as a foil. So robber barons would use what they called corporate paternalism to create company owned towns that housed employees in squalor, just absolute shacks, shabby tent structures, really, really unbelievable conditions. And they paid them in script that they could only use in the company store.
Yep.
So the actual amount that they were paying their employees was
Stayed in the house.
That's exactly right. There, so it was
Yep.
everything stayed in house. There's
And on top of that, they're getting things at cost and charging the market rate, so they're profiting off of the employees that they have, so they're actually paying less than what they're worth.
Yeah, so one of these towns that was owned by Rockefeller was a town in Colorado called Ludlow.
Hmm.
And in 1914, there was what was called the Ludlow Massacre, where a militia that was kind of a combination of Colorado State militia and the company guards, the company security folks.
Kind of like a Pinkerton kind of group.
Yeah, so
Oh,
they opened fire on striking workers at this coal mine in this tent colony and killed 21 people, including 11 children. And the way they killed the children was the workers were worried that they were going to get shot at, so they dug a hole to where all the children would get inside the hole whenever this started. So that's what happened. All the children and four adult women went down inside this hole, and the militia burned them alive in order to prevent them from organizing into a labor union. So this was a, I would say it was the lowest point in American corporate history in terms of morality. Maybe, maybe
to
not.
that point, or even to today's standard.
Well, I'm going to talk about that at the end.
Okay.
That's an interesting thing. But things changed in the U.S. after the end of World War One. Things changed. Robber barons were no longer. They were viewed in a very negative light, and those monopolies gave way to like professionally managed giant corporations like General Motors and IBM International Business Machines. All these just really big, but actual corporations. They weren't run by one person. You know,
General Electric.
yeah, there
Yeah.
was so it was GE's a really really great example of a great American company. And it was such a big change that by the end of World War II, corporate executives were seen as organization men. And the executives were like the people who were admired and revered throughout all society because they were expected to balance customers and workers and communities and yes, also stakeholders or shareholders, but those shareholders were just one of many stakeholders that executives were trying to address. This was a time when union power in the United States was really, really strong. Pensions for workers and direct benefit pensions, not direct um, contribution pensions, they were generous. Wages grew almost in lockstep with productivity. So between 1947 and 1979, wages grew 91%. 91% wages went up. And the reason wages went up is because the second industrial age and all of the high tech manufacturing was causing productivity to go up. So as productivity went up, so did wages, so did pensions, so did all of the contributions to employees and their communities. And it got to be so ingrained in American corporations that Johnson and Johnson, the corporate behemoth Johnson and Johnson, in 1943, they wrote a credo. And in that credo, they said that their corporate values put customers first, employees second, communities third, and shareholders fourth. Fourth. So the value of shareholders to the company, to the corporation, was in fourth place behind customers, employees, communities, and then shareholders. That is stakeholder capitalism at its finest. That is what is historically the American style of capitalism.
You take
capitalism.
care of the people that you need to, you will profit, and the shareholders will get what they get.
It's exactly right. Corporate profit models during this time, they balanced efficiency with employee welfare, knowing that healthy, stable workforces improve productivity and increase profitability. And that continued. So that was all the way from the 1920s until the 1970s. So we had 50 solid years of that kind of what was called stakeholder capitalism. Now we go to Act Two. And Act Two happened in the 1970s, and it was storm clouds. So there was an OPEC oil embargo that quadrupled our energy costs. And that quadrupling of energy costs affected everything in the economy in the 1970s. I remember this because one of my first jobs was pumping gas at a gas station in Savannah, Georgia, where you were born, called King's Fina, and we had gas lines. So if you had if you had a license plate that ended in an even number, then on even days you could get gas. And if it had an odd number, on odd days you could get gas. But you couldn't get gas if you went to the gas station on the opposite day, because there was all and you I would go to work and there would be lines for a block. I mean, I would be steady pumping gas all day long because there was so little supply and so much demand for this really, really high priced gas lead. So they even named it stagflation because they had this high inflation and really high unemployment. And this is why people think of Jimmy Carter as being a horrible president, because Jimmy Carter was the president during the OPEC oil embargo and during this time of stagflation, and because he was directly responsible for all these new environmental regulations and safety laws that were added so that people who wanted to start new businesses couldn't, because the regulatory burden of starting businesses just was too much. There's so businesses were complaining about overregulation, and Wall Street was just looking for any way that they could to make money. So that's the 1970s. We still had this stakeholder capitalism, but everything was changing. Nothing was making money anymore. The world was turned upside down on its head. So then we go to the 1980s. And the 1980s, that decade, is the single most harmful decade to American capitalism.
Well, that's the rise of Wall Street.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
So this was the era of the hostile takeover. These corporate raiders, they would come in with junk bond cash target firms, and they would any company that they deemed as lazy, they would take over the company, fire half the people, three-quarters of the people, do some efficiency reviews and relaunch the business as
It's the next generation of cunning men.
So boards learned this brutal lesson. You either boost the stock price, you either increase shareholder value, or you're going to be bought, you're going to be stripped, and then you're going to be sold again. And that so there's one guy. There's a great book that's out now called "The Man Who Broke Capitalism," and it's about GE's Jack Welch. And Jack Welch became the poster child for 1980s shareholder capitalism. He went in 4 years at General Electric. He cut 100,000 jobs. His nickname was Neutron Jack because the buildings would stay, but the people would all be gone, because he would just fire people. He had this saying that you have to be number one or number two or you're going to be gone. He would intentionally require his managers to rank their employees in the top 10%, the bottom 10%, and the middle 80%, and everybody who was in the bottom 10% got fired. Every year they fired 10% of their people. And then from a policy perspective, there were two rule changes that the government made that that I think were horrible decisions. The first was the stock option pay, and the stock option pay is rather than paying CEOs and direct corporate officers by compensation, they would pay them in stock options.
Yep.
So selling, making the stock higher in price rather than making the company greater in value became the pathway to get ahead as a corporate executive. Very, very different. This is a completely different type of corporate executive than the corporate executive that existed during the 50 years prior from 1920 to 1970.
Because their goal is profits and not value.
Well, now the goals were profits, not value. But
right. No, that's what I'm saying. Is like now you have this generation where we can pump out shit products, but as long as people are buying, we don't care. They'll buy it again, and we'll keep making money off of it.
Yeah, and the other thing that the SEC allowed corporations to start doing is to buy back their own stock. So rather than building a new factory, they could just buy back a bunch of their stock, and since they were buying it, it would increase the stock share. And just by buying back themselves, they would increase the value. They would increase the shareholder value without doing anything. No research and development, no expansion of factories, no increasing of employee wages, no increasing of employee benefits, none of that stuff. All they had to do is take the money that they had made and use the money they had made to buy their own stock. And they didn't even really, they could just say, okay, we're going to split the stock in half. So we used to have 500,000 shares. Now we're going to have 1 million shares. That gives us 500,000 more shares that we can sell. And oh, by the way, we're going to buy half of those shares that we just invented out of thin air. So that's all the 1980s. That happened in the 1980s, and it was a huge pivot where people were like, oh, the 70s were bad. Boom, we're going to move, and everything went to shareholder value. So Act 4 is the fallout of this. So this what I call new capitalism. This new capitalism, in the 3 decades after that, worker pay flatlined. So between 1979 and 2009, instead of 91%, it rose only 8%. And it rose only 8% when worker productivity jumped by 80%. So they were 80% more productive and only 8% more compensated over that 30-year period. In the meantime, CEO pay, which is no longer tied to the value of the company, but only to the price of the stock, soared by more than 900%. So that by 2017, CEO pay was more than 361 times the average worker pay. And that's only on average. So you think about some of the massive.
Well, you think of the 10% outliers.
That's exactly right. So people like Elon Musk, people like Jeff Bezos. These guys are at the very, very front of that average. Well,
this generation of cunning men.
Yeah. So the value of the company was no longer important. So that's how we get back to what I was talking about last year, where Apple spent almost, more than 4 times what we spent in the entire CHIPS Act over a 4-year period, literally to train a workforce in China the size of California. So every worker in California, that number of people is the number of people that they trained in China And now China has this wonderful manufacturing capacity, and we have this hollowed out manufacturing capacity, because between 1980 and 1920, offshoring and automation and anything that you could do to decrease costs in your company was what corporate executives were chasing. So now I get to Act Five, where we are today, and this is where I'll ask you a question. There, so in 2019, biggest CEOs in America, Bezos was one of them, proclaimed a return to stakeholder capitalism. They said, "Oh, we're going to go back to the capitalism that used to exist in America. We recognize that all this offshoring, all this stuff was wrong. We're going to go back." But 6 years later, that's what they said in 2019. 6 years later, nothing has changed. Absolutely nothing has changed. The the boards are still pegged to shareholder return. Business Roundtable lobbies against social issues and shareholder voices. President Trump has promised to return to the Gilded Age. He wants to he is hailing in the new golden era. But the most likely outcome of the policies that he is apparently championing is a resurgence of the robber baron era, with wealth being highly concentrated in a very few people, low wage jobs, harsh working conditions, and corporate philanthropy used as a distraction for corporate behavior towards their own employees. And the most obvious example of this is of this reemergence of the robber barons is Starbase, Texas, a newly founded community surrounding Elon Musk's SpaceX factory and launch facility. SpaceX owns 96% of the housing in the town. There are 4 houses in the entire town, 4 houses in the entire town that are not owned by SpaceX. The town.
Well, and it was registered with the state as a municipality, so it's an actual city now, kind of like how Halliburton has cities in North Dakota, and I don't know what the oil company that owns basically all of Burrow, Alaska, but it's an oil town.
That's exactly right.
And he is a space town.
And Starbase is what's called a Type C city in Texas. So there's not an election. It's run by a commission of and the commissioners are
SpaceX employees, isn't it?
The commission is appointed by SpaceX employees. So the mayor of the town is the vice president of SpaceX in charge of space launch operations. So the guy who's...
And it's kind of like how X is a place where you can have freedom of speech as long as it's the freedom of speech that Elon enjoys.
So, yeah. So there's... And the company owns restaurants in Starbase. The company owns a grocery store in Starbase. The company owns the rec center inside Starbase. So there is no more close comparison to the tent colony in Ludlow, Colorado, than Starbase, Texas. It is...
Yeah, the difference is air conditioning.
There may be air conditioning. I know that there...
Yeah, but like that's honestly, it's how can we give you, because I had a buddy that moved when I was working at Maximus doing the Affordable Care Act contract. This was the funniest story. He was the person that I went to help me with Excel. So I started an entire department and built an entire staffing analytics department in Excel because they wouldn't give me the software that I needed. And I had this one guy on my team that if I had problems, I would go to him because he was smarter in Excel than I was. Nerdiest guy in the world. And he was like, "Hey, I think I'm going to go work the oil fields in North Dakota. It's a 2-year contract, but you make really, really good money." I was like, you do realize what that is, right? Like it's 80-hour weeks. You are living where they tell you to live. It's not a good house whatsoever. You're sharing it with a couple other dudes who are probably not going to be your brand of people because they're the kind of people that are okay with living in North Dakota on the oil fields. So are you sure that that's where you want to go? He's like, yeah, I'm going to make bank and I'll be back in 2 years. And then 13 months later, when he broke his contract and had to pay everything back to the oil company that hired him, and it financially ruined him to come back away from it because of the obligations that he had, because the lifestyle was so hard. He was working 70-hour weeks. He was in constant need of putting on this ridiculous amount of PPE, and the people that he's with are just absolutely miserable because they're being so worked to the bone. And the irony of it is they're all like, yeah, we're making so much money. But then you have a McDonald's in town that's charging $17 for a Big Mac because that's the cost of living there. And they don't have any time in their life to actually enjoy the things that they're working for. So, how is this any different than indentured servitude?
Yeah. So when we look at where our country is today, wages, productivity continues to rise, wages continue to drop. There's we've got all these factories that they're not we can't even restart the factories because the factories um, have been torn down to build new housing or converted into niche apartments. There
Or they're so obsolete that it would just be the same cost of building a new factory.
and both of America's political parties claim to be populist, but neither of these claiming to be populist organizations have done anything since the 1980s to recreate an economy that works for the American people. So here's the questions. There's so with worker retirement programs today are almost entirely defined contribution stock investment funds. So a 401k that you put $100 in a month, and the company says we'll put $50 in. So they're going to put $50 into that account. So all of the risk that used to be an employee pension uh, funds, because what those pension funds would do, they would say, hey, when you retire, this is the salary you're going to get. So you're going to get $500 a month, $1,000 a month, $1,500 a month. That's very much like Social Security is. It's a defined benefit contribution program. There's there's well there's if employers are going to continue to shift all of the productivity gains into shareholder value, is it reasonable to require employers, once they get past a certain cap, say like $1 million share value of the company, $5 million share value of the company, whatever is the right number. Now those two things are pretty interesting, because if you do $1 million, then 96.5% of the companies don't in the US do not have $1 million of value.
Mm-hmm.
And less than 1% of the companies in the United States have a share value of more than $5 million. So most small businesses, most mom and pop shops would not be covered by it at all. But I think it's time to start to pull back on the stock, to pull back on allowing companies to only consider their shareholder values, because it not only affects the employees, it affects the nation. Every time they only pay their employee, they don't pay their employees enough so that they can eat, that employee goes onto the public payroll, and we all end up paying for their SNAP benefits.
My taxes are paying for their welfare.
That's exactly right.
They're getting state subsidized salaries for their employees off of my money.
And when those people reach retirement age or become disabled, and now they're on Medicaid, their health care is now paid for by the government. So I think it's time to go back to what is And people say this is socialist or whatever to require some kind of a pension plan with a company, but I'm like, no, this is going back to stakeholder capitalism, the capitalism that built the greatness of America, and not going all the way back to the robber baron era, where because we're at this place now, we're at this pivot point, we're at another pivot point similar to the industrial age, to where people like Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg and these people who have immense quantities of wealth can shape the market. And with the
Yeah.
impending challenge.
Mark Zuckerberg does not need to have a bunch of cows that he only feeds macadamia nuts and beer to. Like, cool, dude, that's great. Fuck off a little bit. You have people that you could be paying more as opposed to the however millions and millions of dollars you're headhunting all of these AI engineers for. You have frontline employees that are doing the grunt work. You have outsourcers in other countries that you're paying pennies on the dollar because those countries don't value the worth of their employees either. But there is money that you can put into. There's going to be a data center in Cuna that's getting built right now. Gigantic facility. It's going to have tons of employees, and they will have a median wage. They're not going to have a great wage. And what's interesting is one of the things that I learned about when I was doing the ACA, especially learning about HIPAA laws, FMLA laws, and how the ACA was impactful. There's already a litany of laws that dictate whether or not a small business or a big business is the size that they are. If they're under 50 employees or if they make a certain amount of money, you as an employee of a small company won't necessarily qualify for FMLA because the government can recognize that that small company doesn't have the affordability to provide FMLA. Whereas if you have over 50 employees and this employee has put in X amount of hours, they've clearly given value to that company where the company should be providing them family medical leave. And there's already recognition between small business and large business. I think the classification of mega business is not that far of a stretch where, okay, if you hit this criteria, you made it in America. You are beyond what you need. Um, Pay it forward with the people that got you there. And I don't think that that's unrealistic at all. I think the problem that you might face with that is the whole, this is the thing that Rogan always talks about, is if you put a cap on capitalism, are those people still going to want to do it? Because here's the argument about the robber barons. We would not have the connected America that we have if those train moguls didn't put it all under Union Pacific. Now, did Union Pacific do horrible things? God, yes. Absolutely they did. However, the world that we live in now is because of those terrible things. And I would argue, not in his defense, because I will not ever defend this man, the world that will exist in 100 years with the technology of AI, rapid transportation, rocket technologies, that's a cool world that somebody is going to live in. That is going to be a phenomenal world with a lot of capabilities. Sam Altman just came out, I think it was a couple days ago, where he's trying to figure out the solution of being able to provide ChatGPT 5 to every human on the planet, because it would be a game changer and it would level everyone's ability to get out of poverty. And I think that that's potentially a good thing. Has Sam Altman done some maybe not so good things in order to get to that end? Likely. Has Elon Musk done some terrible things to be able to make it so that way people have internet when Ukraine's infrastructure is destroyed? Yeah. Did he do some terrible things to get to that point? Very much. Yes, I agree with that. Um, the thing that I would be concerned of is, do you still have the capability of funding those projects that are the expense that they are, if your money is being put in the way where now all of a sudden, okay, we have this much bankrolled for market research, but now we cut in that much for employees. I think that's the correct decision. But how much does that slow progress?
I think there's so, um, I think it's important to remember that what we're talking about is a redefined capitalism.
Okay.
So when folks are like, oh well, if you mess with the levers of capitalism, you're just you're fixing the game on behalf of some people and to the expense of other people. And why would a person, want to make a 15% return when they could get a 35% return on
Right.
their investment? But I think it's important to recognize that yeah, we did need a wild west, and the westward expansion and the industrial revolution. The United States would not have become the 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 uh, the great manufacturing center of the world without people like Rockefeller and Carnegie and J.P. Chase. That we just wouldn't. There's but that's but that but we also can't forget GE before Jack Welch, and we can't forget Johnson and Johnson, and we can't forget that Hostess that made Twinkies, and all these corporations that for decades had a contract, a social contract with their workers, with the communities that they operated in, and with the nation, um, to to uh, to do business in a way that balanced everyone's needs, balanced the needs of the company to create value and to provide for their posterity, to balance the needs of workers to be able to feed and house their families, and send their kids to college for education and create the workforce of the future, and and to put parks, that like there's Albertsons Park in Boise. It was put there by Albertsons, the company that is now Kroger, right?
Yeah,
So
because Catherine Albertson wanted to have a park that was a place to preserve wildlife for the city that she loved.
yeah, so
Uh,
so that was American stakeholder capitalism. In beginning in the 1980s, we let Wall Street redefine capitalism, and from my perspective, that's not conservative. That is not conservative to just let one small interest group completely change the way that the American economy works, to the detriment of of uh, of their employees, of those communities, and to American national security, because now we don't make our own ho-hos. We don't make our own Twinkies. We don't make uh uh you know
that is important for America's national security.
yeah,
Where are we going to get our Twinkies? We got to make sure Woody Harrelson's on our side.
yeah, it's like there's we allowed the soul of American capitalism to be robbed, and it was robbed by stock traders, by people selling stock on Wall Street that had no connection with corporate value, with uh, with building an infrastructure that grows with the country. We're sitting here right now in this. Oh man, we got to compete with. I just listened to this week the general. I can't remember his name, but the general who's the supreme allied commander in Europe gave a talk saying that, hey, we're ready to fight two wars there, so we can fight this war in Europe and also fight a war in the Pacific. And I'm like, that's what every politician wants to hear. They want to hear that we're ready to fight these two wars. We're not ready to fight two wars. We are not ready to fight a war in Ukraine, fight a war in Finland, to fight a war in in Iran to fight a war.
I'd argue we're not ready to fight one war, let alone two.
That is exactly right. And why? Because you know what it takes to build artillery rounds? Steel. You need steel. You got to have steel. If you don't have steel, you can't build artillery rounds. If you don't have steel, you can't build the artillery pieces to shoot the artillery rounds. If you if you if you can't manufacture gunpowder, for crying out loud, then you can't make bullets. You can't make artillery rounds. You can't make.
Phosphorus is a mineable material. You kind of need to mine for it.
So when we compare ourselves to China in all of these critical industries that make up national power, we 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 are not even a near peer. We are so far behind them. And 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 look at this entire global war on terror was one general after another general after another general after another general saying that victory is 2 years away. We're just 2 years away, and Al Qaeda will no longer exist. The Taliban is going to be off the face of the planet. So for 20 years, they kept moving the goalpost, moving the goalpost, moving the goalpost, and now we spent 20 years fighting in Afghanistan so that the Taliban can still be in charge and still be running terrorist training camps the exact same way they were in 2000 and 1999 and 1998 and 1997 and all the years before then. And it's just there's I think that, again, I'm on the conservative side, but I'm like, then it is time to make corporations pony up to the table. And if they're not going to pony up to the table and do what they said they were going to do in 2019 and go back to stakeholder capitalism, we need to figure out ways to force a move through regulation, through market actions, through that force corporations to reinstitute the kind of capitalism that existed up all the way up until 1980. There's
I don't know if I talked to you about this. I listened to an interview with Steve Bannon a couple weeks ago. And like, obviously I'm not a big fan of a lot of his views. But and when I bring this up in the shop, it's always funny because I will start it with like, so I listened to this interview with Steve Bannon and all of my progressive friends are just like, ugh, that guy. And I'm like, dude's fucking intelligent.
He's a populist too.
Like,
he's a populist, and he knows that people are getting handed the shaft.
yeah, and here's the thing that I wish people on the left would really understand. When you listen to people on the other side of the aisle, you can start to understand what they're actually talking about. And if you just listen to what your people are telling you about what the other side is saying, it's largely a lot of horseshit. Now, again, I'm not a big fan of some of his views, but he hates Elon Musk. And I love the fact that he hates Elon Musk. So I'm like, it's right after the whole like, oh, I hope Trump sends him back to South Africa. And I'm like, okay, I want to hear what this guy has to say. So he brings up this really interesting point that makes me understand MAGA. It doesn't help me want to get into that world, but it is a stark difference between MAGA that elected Trump the first time and MAGA that is currently in office. And he brings up the idea of if you really look at the original MAGA movement that was starting in like 2015, 2016, the left was largely making fun of them because we were like, these are all a bunch of uneducated people. You've got farmers and you've got miners and you've got plumbers and you've got the lifeblood of America.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, it's the lifeblood of America. You're right. They may not be educated. Guess what? I went to trade school too. I'm pretty fucking smart. And I can relate a lot with people who are in the trades that are blue collar workers because I'm a blue collar worker and I really do have a lot of passion for people who work with their hands. And I understand when people are saying it's fucking expensive to live. And, when you're looking at it from 8 years now, it's really easy to see like, yeah, they voted to get rid of corruption. They voted to make it so that way life could be affordable again and that we could just get government out. And now you have this new generation of people that are clinging onto MAGA, but it's Elon Musk and it's Mark Zuckerberg and it's Jeff Bezos and it's all these people that say, let's get into this wonderful age of AI where everyone will be able to flourish so well and we can move into automation and think of how much beauty this is going to bring to America. And Bannon's like, yeah, and think of how many jobs you're going to destroy. Uh, and it's really interesting because I feel for that. I have so much compassion for that because I'm in that space. And I can understand, like, yeah, fuck those guys that are trying to get rid of all these jobs because all they are trying to do is make money and make their name in history. They want to be the new Rockefellers. They want to be these people that have some kind of immortality in history because of the way that they shaped the world. But in reality, all they're doing is making the time that they're living in harder for the people that are supporting their visions.
Yeah, and it's so unfortunate that people are like, "Did you really vote for this?" It's like, look, here's what I voted for. I had a choice between a squishy turd and a chunky turd. That was my choice. What kind of turd do you want to have running the country? So it's not like, oh, you voted for all these policies that Trump is implementing. No, I knew what he was going to do. I saw what he did before, and I listened to what he said, and he's doing exactly what he said he was going to do. So there's nothing about what he's doing that makes me go, that's not what he's doing something different than what he said he was going to
Yeah,
do.
it's not like he lied.
But but
Well, not about this.
but the choice was, the that turd or the other turd. That was the choice. And
Yeah, and at least that turd his people voted for.
that's the thing that there's for me, and I'm an independent voter. I've voted for people from both parties.
Yeah.
I've always been an independent voter, and until I moved to Colorado, I had never voted in a primary election because I wasn't a Democrat. I wasn't a Republican. It's none of my business. Whoever they decide is going to run, that's choice A, and whoever the other one decided, that's choice B. That's the way that I've always voted. Now, because Colorado lets you choose which one you want to vote if you're registered independent or unaffiliated is what they call it. I vote in the Democratic Party because every state level position in Colorado, because it's a Democratic state, every state level position is going to be a Democrat. So the
Yeah,
only
see, and I vote. I'm registered Republican in Idaho because I don't want crazy people like Janice McGeachin running the
That's
state.
exactly right. And the only way that you
Yeah,
can have a choice at the state level races is to vote in the party that is absolutely going to win those state level races.
yeah, and it sucks because I'm not trying to get the people that I want to see policies enact. I'm on the defense 100% of the time. I'm like, okay, I've got this crazy lady who is doing all sorts of actions as soon as the governor's out of state because she's lieutenant governor, and she's like, well, I'm the acting governor now. I've got the guy who's legally changed his name to pro-life so that way he can go into the debates every year to say abortion is murder, and that's the only thing that he runs off of. I've got some fucking old white guy. All right, fucking old white guy it is.
Yeah, and there's and like if there was a Republican running for my congressional district, and I thought that they were a wonderful person, and I thought that they had great ideas, and I thought that they would be a great representative for my interests, I would not vote
You
for
probably
them.
hope they make it to the general election.
Because I'm going to still vote in the Democratic primary because that guy is not going to win. That person is not going to win. And the only reason they're not going to win is because they've got an R by their name, and I live in Boulder.
So I just listened to the episode of Rogan with Tallarico, the uh House representative in Texas. And it was really interesting because I've actually been following him on TikTok for a little while because he recently had this really, really great opposition to a bill that was being proposed that required teachers to put the Ten Commandments in every public school. And the bill was getting passed on a Saturday, and he was asking the person, okay, when is the Sabbath? Doesn't the Ten Commandments say to not work on the Sabbath? So why are we passing this law on the Sabbath? What is more important for us to live by the Ten Commandments or to tell other people to live by the Ten Commandments? Uh, how many people in the house have committed adultery? You know, should they be living by the Ten Commandments or should they be bestowing it upon others? Really, really amazing Christian values. I have so much respect for this guy because he is the Christian that I grow up thinking this is what it's supposed to be. This is not a nationalist movement. This is the love that you speak about. And I genuinely, if you haven't had a chance to listen to it, it is an amazing episode. Really, really fantastic. The dude's a Democrat in Texas. And he talks a lot about how that's a struggle because he knows what his views are and he knows having a D next to his name is basically one hand tied behind his back because the state is a Republican run state. And he talks a lot about how much harder it is that he has to work across the aisle just to be able to build the relationships to make it so that way things can happen. And you know, it's so frustrating because we're in this whole position where left, right, back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And the sooner that Americans realize that the battle is not left and right, but the struggle is up and
Yeah.
down, and it's the people that have power and the power of the masses of the people, that's the real struggle that people need to be focusing on. I think that like these types of conversations are a really good example for people to realize that we are not our enemy. The people who are trying to control our lives and the people that are trying to get money out of our pocket so that way they can pad their own and make it so that way they're taking food out of our mouth, those are the people that are the real issue.
Yeah. So there's I'll end, and then we probably ought to go to just a search. There's
Yeah, let's just talk about Ozzy Osbourne.
but I got to give
Let's be sad and happy at the same time.
I got to give a book recommendation. The book is
You'd say what
a
again?
book recommendation.
Okay.
So the book is The Man Who Broke Capitalism by David Gellis, and
Okay. The man who
it's
broke
on
capitalism.
audiobook, and it's it's probably the best book about Jack Welch ever written. Because every other book that's written about Jack Welch is like he's the corporate, guru. He's the management guru. He knew everything. Jack Welch broke capitalism, and we need to go back to the
That's
capitalism we
fantastic
had.
because I'm on the last chapter of the book that I'm currently reading, so I need something new. I there's a did you see the movie The Martian with Matt Damon?
No.
Fantastic movie. It's so the author of the book is this guy Andy Weir, and he is a very very scientific author. It's really really interesting, and The Martian is about manned mission to Mars and a guy who gets stranded and how he has to survive and how he has to figure out problems. So the book that he wrote after that was called Project Hail Mary, and it just got announced that it's going to be a movie here in I think March or April. But Ryan Gosling's going to be in it, and it's about a there's basically this algae bloom in space that eats up all of the energy from the sun. And how do you solve this problem when the sun is dimming and we have no idea how to solve it? So it's this whole earth saving mission. It's really, really fantastic book. I'm in the last two chapters and I need something a little bit more uh not fantasy so that way I can actually pay attention to it a little bit more.
There's a yeah, it's a good audiobook. They've got it on Audible.
So, when did because I remember growing up, you were always introducing us into the music that you listened to. And I remember in Georgia specifically when we were there the second time. And we had it was the new houses that they had built just for all the Ranger
Yep.
guys. And there was like that back room next to the living or next to the dining room that had all of your CDs. And it was like John Denver and Supertramp. So when did you get into Black Sabbath?
Oh man, there's so Black Sabbath had to be when I was in high school. Um and and I mean the two well I'll say three. The three bands from that
Can I
genre.
guess? Hold on.
Okay?
Your three bands were Meatloaf, Dio, and Black Sabbath?
No.
Damn.
Meatloaf is good, but I wouldn't call Meatloaf in the same genre as Black Sabbath.
No, no, I wouldn't think they'd be the
So
same
I did
genre
listen to a
now.
lot of Meatloaf. There's but Black Sabbath, Metallica, and AC/DC. And I
Okay.
think those three bands really formed the foundation of what heavy metal is. And and in very different ways. So AC/DC was, I was talking about populism. AC/DC was populist rock. It was a heavy metal style that fans would just be like, just rocking out these unbelievably, uh, uh,
It's stadium rock.
yeah, stadium rock. That's a really good way. And Metallica was this technical. I mean, they were taking heavy metal music that was viewed as like this, satanic, really devil worshiping music, and they were making it like the ELO of heavy metal. They were ELO's the Electric Light Orchestra, which was very complex, like Pink Floyd. So Pink Floyd was a kind of rock band that just wrote music that was as complex, uh, uh, acoustically as complex as any of the masters, as any Beethoven, as any of those kind of classical masters of music. That's Metallica. Metallica is just like this. They're so and they're still touring to this day, and
Yeah.
they're so ACD so is ACDC as a matter of fact. Um, but
Not as well as Metallica, but they are.
but Black Sabbath took the persona that was begun by Alice Cooper, and they took it to a level that was just beyond the pale. The the persona of the band, and in particular the persona of Ozzy Osbourne, was the fateful moment when he was in the middle of uh, uh, a press conference, and a bat flew at him just out of random. And
Well, it was a fan that threw it at him, wasn't it?
maybe it was. I just know that he bit the head off of a bat, and I remember
Yeah,
that
the
story.
two things are he bit the head off a bat and he pissed on the Alamo.
Yeah. So all of a sudden, now this is just a guy who is he's the ultimate in anti-authority, the ultimate in, there's it's like, I mean, even the name of the band Black Sabbath, at that time frame, that was a contemptuous name. It was,
It was so counterculture.
yeah, and not just counterculture, and that you do your thing and I'm going to do mine.
I
Counterculture.
oppose
I
you.
oppose you. I oppose you. And
Well, and there was this is one of the things that's because it's around the same time as LaVeyan Satanism. So when I associate loosely with the Satanic Temple, it's largely because of politics. When I first was looking into Satanism, it was the LaVeyan Satanism. And what's really interesting is it's just a philosophy that says, yeah, we're going to use all of this iconography that we know you don't like because you don't like it. We are here to oppose you. And that's the whole point of it. We're just going to be a show. We don't believe in any of this stuff, but we know it pisses you off.
Yeah, and that's and Ozzy did that, and he did it in such a way that was magnetic, and people just loved it. And I was watching a video last night where Ozzy and what's his daughter's name?
Kelly.
Kelly. Yeah, Ozzy and Kelly were in a gymnasium with a bunch of elementary school kids playing Crazy Train on
I saw that video.
on the just the musical instruments that a
Yeah.
normal elementary school would have. So they had, xylophones and tom
And
toms,
the kids are all jumping up and they're so excited.
and then to watch Ozzy's eyes light up, and he starts just clapping at these kids, and there is no way that the 19-year-old Ozzy Osbourne would have ever dreamed he would be standing in front of a group of elementary school kids singing, not singing, but playing an instrumental version of Crazy Train to him, to honor him, to say welcome to him, to say all these wonderful things like, hey, we are, we want to take your music and carry your music into the future. And what more could you want out of a musician? I mean, I think of uh now I'm who's the guy who went around the country saying "This land is your land." Man, I can't believe because I'm thinking of Ozzy. I'm having a hard time thinking of his name, but
This land is your land. This land is ours. I can't.
so you know that
I
song.
know the song you're thinking about. I don't know who the artist is.
They're so that song is in the mind of more Americans than probably any other song, including the national anthem, because it was targeted at fourth and fifth grade kids, and everybody learns it in school, and it's this wonderful song about everybody belongs and nobody is excluded. That's basically what
Yep.
the song is about, and it's just it's anyway, and that's that same kind of affection is given to Crazy Train, for crying out loud, and War Pigs. I mean, these just really really great songs that if you listen to them, it's like, man, this guy had it going on. And then you'd see early interviews with him when he was all strung out on drugs or whatever. He had these moments of clarity when he was writing music that allowed him to write some really really amazing songs. And that's why I think that Black Sabbath and Ozzy Osbourne, they are, I was talking before about beauty. That music is beautiful. It will last longer than Ozzy Osbourne is.
Yep.
Metallica will last longer than Metallica exists. There's and the same.
I also think it's interesting how every generation has been able to be introduced to him, because you were introduced to him as rebellious, but honestly the way that I was introduced to him was the Osbournes, when reality TV was becoming a thing. And that's when, Brad and I were growing up in punk rock culture, and that resonated with us. And Ozfest had a whole bunch of bands that we really loved, and they did this show on MTV called Road to Ozfest, where they were giving bands an opportunity to be like, hey, if you are an up and coming band, we want to be able to provide opportunities. Like, we know that our genre is not going to be able to sustain headlining tours on its own. But if we all come together as a community, we can make Ozfest a thing. And Ozfest was bigger than Lollapalooza. It was bigger than Warp Tour. There was this band that came out of nowhere called A Dozen Furies that won this whole Road to Ozfest thing on MTV and had an album come out because Ozzy Osbourne wanted to just give people an opportunity. And, we're growing up watching, people kind of our age, Jack and Kelly, get to be punk rock because their dad is just metal as all get out. And it was kind of this encouraging thing of, oh, you can grow up to be who you want to be, even if that person that you want to be isn't necessarily going to fit into the mold of what everyone's telling you need to be. And I was listening to my podcast this morning that one of the things that Sharon really wanted to have happen out of that show is they really wanted to be able to let people see that he had a human side. And it's not just this whole, yeah, I'm a big personality on stage, but I have a family. I'm a guy like you. Music is that important to me that I want to give it all to you when I'm out there for you.
Yeah, and it really, I think it took the persona of Ozzy and made it so human.
Yeah, and now you have a generation of 5-year-olds that can be raised in Crazy Train because my generation was able to be raised with the Osbournes, and that is just going to be like, hey, these are classics. This is music. This is good music.
Yeah, and I mean, I was thinking about this as well because I was listening to some Green Day yesterday, and that's what Green Day's trying to do right now. Ever since
Hmm.
they got their Hall of Fame induction, they have been like on a mission to become a movement within their fans, something that's and it'll be interesting to see if they. But I mean, there's so many. I mean, I take Ozzy Osbourne and I put him in the same category as Johnny Cash, as Kurt
Hmm.
Cobain, as the Beatles, as Freddie Mercury. I mean, just these really, really unbelievable. Uh, David Bowie. Um,
Yeah.
all,
It I've been talking on the related Ozzy.
Woody Guthrie, by the
He
way.
actually what?
Woody Guthrie was the guy who sang.
Ah, what do you got three?
Sorry.
So there was a video game that came out years ago called Brutal Legend, and it was a game that actually starred Jack Black. And Jack Black did Tenacious D, and Jack Black is actually really big in the metal scene because of Tenacious D. And this whole game, the story of it is Jack Black plays a roadie who accidentally gets killed by a stage prop and then winds up being transported to this metal world. And it's got like Rob Halford does voices, Dio does voices, and Ozzy is a recurring character in the game that you have to go back and forth constantly. And Ozzy is one of the greatest characters in the game because he's annoyed by the fact that you have to keep going and visiting him. He's like, "Oh, what the hell are you doing here again?" So, what I think is really interesting about a lot of these metal guys is they do get to this point where they stop having that shell and they start being the human side of them. And I think Jack Black is a good representation of what it is that you're talking about with Green Day because Jack Black, if you look at his career now, it's the Minecraft movie, it's his YouTube series. Like he's doing things that are more children related because people my age grew up with him. And now, how can we introduce Jack Black to our kids? We certainly don't want to introduce them to, oh, here, this is a song called Fuck Her Gently. It was on this wonderful record. But you can introduce now, like, hey, how can we do this for kids? How can we make it so that way people can still enjoy what they grew up with, but then share it with their kids? And I think that the metal scene specifically has one of the funniest perceptions of it being just angry people. But I think that that is one of the most community-driven groups of people that are nothing but loving and do everything to take care of one another because they've all been outcasts, so they know what it is. And as you're raised in that community and you grow in that community, you start to see more of that, and it's such a compassionate, loving community.
Yeah, there's so many wonderful little pockets of that in the United States. I've been watching in Instagram. Instagram knows me, so they send me the videos that they know I'm gonna like to watch. But I watch rodeo videos, and I mean, now kids, when they start doing rodeo, they get an Instagram channel, they get a social media, they get a TikTok channel, and they post pictures of themselves riding. So here's these 8, 9, 12, 15-year-old kids riding bulls, and it's just this part of Americana that that and that's the thing. So there's this the social aspect of America is intact. I think it's the social aspect of America is intact. What's broken is our capitalism. We allowed our capitalism to break, to just shatter on the floor in the 1980s, and we've just like pretended that didn't happen. And we're like, oh well, we're just going to keep giving the market rain. We're going to keep giving the market rain, keep giving them rain, keep giving them rain, and hoping that they're going to come to their senses. But I'm with Steve Bannon. They're not. They're not coming to their senses, and there's. I think the conservative solution is to take our economy back.
I think we can both agree on this. Yeah, yeah. Let's just agree on that. And on that note, so since we're gonna agree, that's our episode. Yeah, we're just gonna agree.
See, we solved all the world's problems by
yeah, and we didn't kill each other, or we didn't unalive each other in the process.
No unaliving allowed.
So if you guys know anybody that needs some kind of an example of these kinds of conversations and relationships, and if you have any friends or family that you want to share this episode to, please do. We're on Spotify. We're on Amazon. We're on, what's that other one? YouTube. Yeah, we're on the YouTube as well. We are also on the social medias. We're on X and Instagram. We will probably be in more places in the future, but that's where we're at now. I don't know. Is there anything else that you wanted to cover before we go?
No, I think I talked about enough with my capitalist rant.
Yeah. 5 acts.
Five acts of broken capitalism.
All right, guys. Well, hey, thanks again for joining the Separate Talk podcast. If you haven't already, please follow us, like us, leave a review. It will help get our message out. And until next week, be well.
Peace.